Welcome to our NorCal VOAD conference. We are so excited to have you here today. My name is Kevin Cox, and I have the privilege of being the chair of the NorCal VOAD and the state of California VOAD. We look forward to being able to serve your communities, and that's one of the things that this is all about. And when we look at a VOAD and serving a VOAD, it is always local. And we want to make sure that you all here, we are in Santa Clara here, San Jose area, we want to make sure that you have the opportunity to network with your government officials, your partners in response, and get to know each other. Because as you say, and as we all have said for years, we don't want to exchange business cards 5 minutes after the disaster. We want to get to do that here before. We could not do this conference without our good friends at Cal OES, the Listos, and the United Way. And you're good to hear from many of those organizations today. So let me introduce one of the Trinity, Valerie Brown and Adriana Rabkin. They are going to be speaking on what is a VOAD. So thank you, ladies.
Testing? Yes. Okay, good. Testing, is this on?
Yeah. Well, good morning, everybody.
Closer.
Thank you. Too far away.
Closer.
Oh, sorry. You can tell I don't like these very much. Thank you all for coming. This is tremendous to see all of you. I'm so grateful. Closer? Even better? Oh, okay. I've got lipstick on, though. I just want to say in response to what Kevin shared, I could not have done this without the amazing NorCal VOAD executive team. It was phenomenal. And talk about collaboration. They asked me to step up and lead this. I was happy to do it. And every step of the way, somebody on the committee was always standing up and saying, well, I can take that, and I'll do this. And have you thought about this? Well, I'll lead that. And it was collaboration at its finest. So I will happily do another conference with this group. I will happily respond in disasters with this group. It was blue skies, tremendous work, and you can see how well it all works in gray skies. I am Adriana Rabkin, Director of Marin County VOAD, which sits just north of the Golden Gate Bridge, and I'm also on the NorCal VOAD Executive Committee, and I am the conference manager. So if you do have any comments or questions or complaints, please let me know, because we got 2 more of these to do, and we want to make them good. Thank you.
Thank you. And Adriana was the miracle worker that made this happen in just a very few short weeks. So thank you for that. My name is Valerie Brown. I am the Normal Blue Skies. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of United Policyholders. I'm also the chair for the last 8 years of San Diego County VOAD. So I've been doing this a while. And I am, or what am I now? And I'm also running a DCNP for San Diego County from the January 2024 floods. So I'm a program director for that as well. And what is VOAD? There we go, perfect. Yeah. I'm the clicker, sir.
As Kevin mentioned, some of this is going to be new to people. Some of you already know this. Bear with me as I walk through a little basics, but I think it's good for all of us to get to the beginning. So what is VOAD? Voluntary, not volunteer. Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster. Some partners go by COAD. It is fine for local partners to be VOADs or COADs. COADs or Community Organizations Active in Disaster. The acronyms are overwhelming to people. We clearly are sticking within emergency management and adding more acronyms, but just so you all know, we are VOADs and COADs. And we all do the same thing. We are collaborations of community-based organizations, or what you'll hear me refer to as CBOs. These include your nonprofit partners, your faith-based organizations, your community organizations like schools, libraries, healthcare clinics, community centers, as well as partners with local and county government agencies. VOADs connect these organizations, and we build a collaborative network to support the community before, during, and after disasters.
And just to piggyback on what you said, put it very succinctly, government is tasked to do things after disaster. We are asked, and that's really the primary difference.
That's a great point. So VOADs are part of a well-established system at the national VOAD level, at the state and territorial level. We are here representing both state VOAD, California State VOAD, as well as our local county VOADs. The national VOAD's been around since 1970.
Those trusted CBOs are your ambassadors that are taking and amplifying messages from government, from you as a VOAD, to share what is available to help people. And this coordination ensures that everybody has the information that's needed, they can get those resources where they're needed, and help our most vulnerable residents in your county through this, right? And then collaboration. That's what we're here to do. So we take these things and we're just playing with each other in the sandbox to get the work done. And what you do, every disaster is going to look very different depending on what the disaster is, what the needs are, the community impact of the resources they have.
So I mentioned that we work throughout the disaster cycle, preparedness, response, and recovery. So in Blue Skies, what does this look like? We meet regularly to build relationships and trust among each other, and our government partners and our CBOs. It's essential that we understand how both sides think about things. That's what forms the best partnership, and that's what builds trust over time. And I have to say, one of the best ways to get people to the table is to understand what's in it for them. Why should they be there? Why should they take their time to come to your meetings, to participate in your exercises? You need to have something for them that brings them into the fold. And it can be, this network of resources and services that you've developed. It can be exercises that you lead or discussions that you hold on particular topics that bring people together. You share information. Help educate partners about what everyone does, and build awareness about the resources and services throughout your communities. Promote preparedness and educational opportunities. Assist VOAD partners with their preparedness through sharing best practices amongst each other. How did you handle COVID with your staff? What did you do? Can help organizations develop their emergency plans. Bring everybody together and discuss what a continuity of operations plan is. How does the food bank manage their coop relative to the smaller organization? They're all going to learn things from each other, and that's what the VOADs do in Blue Skies, is help educate everybody and bring everyone together. And this is all in the name of developing a coordinated disaster response so that we can best support our communities. Yeah. Okay, sorry, thank you. So gray skies. What do we do during gray skies? Gray skies are disaster times. In Marin County, we hold daily conference calls. When we were completely shut out without power in 2019 and the Kincaid fire in Sonoma was happening, we still managed to hold daily conference calls twice a day. People drove to the spots where they could still get access. We brought everyone together. This was our opportunity to share critical information with our government, with our community partners about what government was doing, where shelters were being set up, what was happening, what the expectations were, and it was how we could get information from the communities into the government response, what communities have specific needs. In Marin County, we've been active in small incidents and large-scale disasters over the last 6 years. And just a very quick example, but it was during one of our conference calls during severe weather last year when Office of Emergency Management learned that one of our unincorporated towns had, their sewage plant was down and had been down for 3 days. And that connection would have never been made if it weren't for the VOAD conference call, because those partners didn't know to connect with each other. So build your VOAD, hold your conference calls. It's where we coordinate distribution of resources to everybody. We pushed out emergency food boxes to older adults who were stuck at home. We got them into retirement facilities and living facilities. We distributed COVID tests and emergency financial assistance. And perhaps most importantly, you're getting information out there. You're getting information in a bi-directional way between both during disasters. I want to just walk you through quickly a tale of two disasters. Marin County, during the atmospheric rivers that we had last year, there were a series of them, and there was one incident, but when they first hit, there's a particular town that's unincorporated that has one ingress and egress, one way in and out. It gets flooded. This is a low-income community. This is a community of color. This is a community that is disadvantaged, that feels very disconnected. They don't trust government. And here's what happened. The storm was coming in. Everyone knew about that. Red Cross set up a shelter. Department of Public Works set up flood vehicles that were staged near the ingress-egress point in order to transport people. These are people who leave their community to go to work or schools and had to come home. And here's the problem. None of it was coordinated. So the shelter that was set up, nobody went. The encampment that was nearby, the unsheltered individuals, all found other places to go because they didn't know that the shelter was being set up. Department of Public Works set up this great plan with their ATVs. Nobody used them because nobody in the community knew about them, because nobody in the community was told that this was going to happen. And people were stranded both ways, and nothing happened. So don't rush out to your communities without being part of the coordinated response. Take a minute, figure out what's happening, and work together.
And in San Diego, we were very coordinated. As I said, our VOADs had a lot of practice in the last 20-some years. We get a federally declared disaster about every 4 years, so lots of practice, unfortunately, and lots of partners, which is a blessing. And so for us, we had a hard time, even though we were coordinated, we work hand in hand with our Office of Emergency Services, working with our city jurisdictions that are impacted, and our partners to keep everybody in the same space. We were very challenged because we had elected officials going out and making pronouncements and announcements of help and things that were going to happen in a timeline that was not sustainable. So while we were organized, we had someone making these pronouncements that caused actually more harm in the trust relationships in the community with government because they were being made independently of what could actually happen. And so, one of the lessons we learned was that getting ahead on that communication piece, we were communicating with our partners, we were communicating with government, and we were doing a really good job of rounding up our cowboy organizations that came into town and folding them into our effort. We were not communicating with the community. And that's just a failing we realized we had. So even though we were very heavily coordinated, we had a gap. We have now fixed that gap, but it was a much bigger deal. And so one of the big things we found is just the larger organizations coming in to help in those first 2 or 3 days had expectations that we knew the houses to be cleaned up, and we had the supplies, and we had the PPE, and we're San Diego. We get 11 inches of rain in a year. Not in an hour. And so we were waiting for partners to bring it in. We needed to get the government to get bins and debris removal contracts. And then we had to train people who are used to doing wildfire how to do mold suppression. We ended up making a video in Spanish and English that we could share statewide because we didn't have that resource. And then one of the bigger things was people came in thinking we were going to be able to handle their needs. And that's just not the reality. We had some partners saying, well, where are we going to sleep? Well, I don't know. I didn't know I needed the bunkhouse right now. I have a bunkhouse now, but it took many months to get that bunkhouse ready for volunteer teams. And so just being aware of that. And I think we're at the last thing I've got, right? So closing thoughts. So we are all more effective and efficient in a disaster if we're coordinated. So in California, we're subject to floods, severe weather. We've had a tornado at least once here in LA, right? Earthquakes, mudslides, wildfires. And so with all of these disasters, the best way to support your community is to be connected to this larger network within your county VOAD, your region VOAD, your state VOAD, and if possible, national VOAD. And that way you're going to have access to that critical, timely, accurate information about the developing disaster, location of shelters, resources, debris bins, whatever it is, in those next steps, right? And it allows you to obtain those resources and coordinate through your VOAD. And then this larger network you have with Calfornia VOAD will support you. One of the neat things we've done with Kevin is we've created committees for each of we're mirroring what happens at National VOAD. So we have a construction committee, we have a VOAD startup committee, we have a disaster case management committee, long-term recovery group, and these are working groups that we meet monthly to help put together a state toolkit to help you when you need it. So if you're interested, please see one of us at the end, and we will connect you to that group, because it's you want to get established, get that committee up and running, so that if something happens, you're not reinventing the wheel. You already know the best practices. You have that access to that information, and bring everybody together so that you can create that resilient system that's going to serve everybody impacted by disaster.
Disasters happen in every community, and they come in all shapes and sizes, from a simple incident affecting one community to a major catastrophe affecting an entire region. A hurricane, for example, can cause a massive storm surge and powerful winds, which can lead to flooding, collapsed buildings, fire, loss of power, and other consequences. When these widespread impacts cascade and multiply, we have a catastrophe on our hands. The government will immediately initiate a response to address these challenges. And in the Emergency Operations Center, or EOC, the emergency managers will activate plans to understand the scope of the disaster, to ensure that help reaches those in trouble, and to coordinate police officers, firefighters, and medical teams to make communities safe and secure as soon as possible. There are also a number of non-governmental community and faith-based agencies and organizations that are active during a disaster and will leap into action and work with the government to provide emergency food, shelter, supplies, and more to those in need. The problem is that there is often little communication between different agencies and organizations serving the same community. And even though they can help one another, they may not be aware of each other's efforts. Without information about the operations of other organizations, they could potentially hurt their local recovery effort by duplicating resources, wasting funding and time, putting field staff in danger, and even directly hindering another organization's work. For example, let's say that we encounter a certain community that's been affected by a disaster, and there are two organizations that have decided to lend a hand and supply much-needed resources. Since they're not communicating with each other, imagine they are both providing home cleanup kits. But neither of them is providing food, which the community needs. With a quick exchange of information, one of the organizations could start providing meals. This way, two of the community's needs will be met. During a disaster, these connections are best made through communication networks coordinated with the local Office of Emergency Management. These networks bring together community organizations and agencies during a response. Since the emergency managers in the EOC have a big picture view of what is happening, they can interact and share information. An example of one of these communication networks is the local Voluntary Organizations Active in Disaster, or VOAD. VOAD is a network of non-governmental, community, and faith-based agencies and organizations that specialize in disaster services and convene on a regular basis for information exchange, even when there are no disasters. Although each agency or organization is in charge of its own operation, the members communicate with one another so they can share emergency information and coordinate emergency efforts to provide vital services to those in need. Oftentimes, VOAD has a representative that sits in the EOC with the emergency managers and can help provide critical information on unmet needs and available resources. Some are affiliated with national organizations and should link with them, as these larger agencies will be present during a disaster as well. It is critical to understand that these connections cannot be formed during the chaos that surrounds a catastrophe. We must connect before a disaster strikes and stay connected. Learn how you should connect with your local emergency management office now. From them, you can obtain accurate emergency information and details on how to volunteer. Visit their website and become familiar with the different programs and educational materials that are offered. Sign up for emergency alerts if available. As soon as disaster strikes, check with your local emergency management office to see if it's safe to go into the affected zones, and then determine how you can join the team and help your neighbors. You should also become familiar with the VOAD in your jurisdiction and introduce yourself and your organization or agency so that when disaster strikes, you can be an effective part of that response. To make our communities as safe and secure as possible, we need to bring together all of our resources, connecting our government partners and responders to our professional and voluntary non-governmental agencies active during a disaster, as well as to our neighborhood-based community groups. When we do that, we create an emergency team that has the best experience, the best equipment, and the best local knowledge to deal with any disaster of any shape or size.
So I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker to you today. This is my dear friend, Titus with Crisis Cleanup. He also wears lots of other hats. I actually met him after the Marshall Fire because he was part of the state VOAD leadership team who ended up standing up the long-term recovery group for about 6 months. It was very painful, a lot to get going. He's also was the chair at the time of Mountain West VOAD, which is all the Western states, and putting that conference together. And so I kept running into him, and now we've become really good friends. And I just wanted to share him with you. This was my ask for the exec committee to bring him in because he brings us a wealth of knowledge, different ways of looking at the stuff, very much outside of the box, which I feel will benefit us because as we know with 20, at least as I know for 20 years of disaster recovery, preparedness, education in the state, we are not moving that needle enough to get people prepared for what they need to know. And I find what Aaron brings to the table helps with that. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me. And it's good to see a lot of friendly faces. If I have a fountain of knowledge, it is only because it's a burst pipe, I think. We will be talking a lot. You all will be talking a lot. We're also going to be moving around. So I'm just going to give you a warning. And if you are at a table with fewer than 4 people, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and get up and move to another table. I need 4 per table. And if you don't, I will call you out and I will point to people. So just go ahead and get 4 to a table now. All right, so we are going to do not a presentation. It says keynote speaker. You did not come here to hear me talk. You came here to learn from one another about how to prepare. Because everybody we are each preparedness experts because we know how to meet our basic daily needs. And what that also means is that our communities are preparation experts. What we lack is a way to organize what we already know. And that's what we're going to learn today, and then we're going to prepare together. Too often in preparation, we know from experience that in disasters, response and recovery and mitigation and rebuilding, all of those are community activities. And yet we have a culture where preparation is treated as though it is an individualistic activity. And the social science research just does not support that at all. We prepare better when we prepare together. Preparing together is itself an act of resilience. Having strong social connections is a better indicator of both short-term survivability and long-term resilience than any other single factor, including working infrastructure, 72-hour kits, or anything else. And so the key to preparing for everything, there are two important keys. Number 1, prepare for disruptions, and I'll explain that in just a second. And number 2, prepare together. We're going to go through an exercise together, and by the time we're all done, you will each be deputized to run this facilitation for your communities and train others and just do it. which is going to be awesome. So, preparing for disruptions. All right, so on your table, you will have 2 sheets. Everybody should have 2 sheets. One is I'm told this is not yellow, this is goldenrod, I'm told. This sheet right here, worksheet 1, we're going to take a look at that. So everybody grab worksheet 1. You'll also find a little raffle ticket. I did bring copies of my book, How to Prepare for Everything, so there'll be a raffle at the end. And if you get a copy and you ask me to sign it, I will do it because it makes me feel good. Okay, so on worksheet number 1, you will see a list of a bunch of disasters down the side of this page. When we focus on disasters, it makes us feel bad, right? That's why we don't like preparation. It's a little overwhelming. You go through this list and then you think, well, I made this list and I checked off the first 4 items, so I hope the zombies eat me first, or something, right? When we focus on the disasters that happen, we have very little control over the bad things that happen to us. If we had control over the bad things that happen to us, we'd make sure bad things didn't happen to us. So when we focus on the bad things, on the disasters, it creates FUD. Anybody heard that acronym before? FUD? Any marketers in here? No, I guess it was wrong crowd. FUD is actually a marketing term. It stands for fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And FUD is a great way to get you to buy something. And as we're seeing in the current election cycle, it is also a great way to get you to vote for someone. But FUD is a terrible way to empower communities. So we're going to get rid of the FUD for a second. Across the top of the page, you will see disruptions that disasters can cause. So disruptions to power and computer, food, shelter, water, property, evacuation, disruptions to money, emotional and spiritual needs. And what you'll see here in the middle are X's that illustrate that some disasters cause some of the disruptions. Some disasters, let's say like a major earthquake, might have disruptions across the board. But having a chronic illness is probably not going to make your roof collapse. Right? So not every disaster causes every disruption. Does that make sense? Also, you'll see that the disasters are grouped by external regional disasters, external local disasters, and family and personal disasters. We have a lot of emergency managers and government folks in this room, and we've kind of been taught and indoctrinated that if it's big and it affects a lot of people, that means it's worse. And certainly, as responders, that's true. That means more work for us. But if you're an individual and a family, the size of the disaster doesn't really have an effect on how devastating it can be. The loss of a spouse can be way more devastating than a tree falling on your roof. So just because it's big doesn't necessarily mean that it's worse for any individual. These groupings will become useful a little bit later, but I just wanted to point them out. So now we're going to go to the magical moment, which, like, if I could cue, I don't know, like Odyssey 2001 music or something. Imagine just like some really epic music in your head for me, okay? We're going to take this document, we're going to turn it 90 degrees in this direction. And if you don't remember anything else from today, this is the thing to remember. If you turn it this way and you read the document across, and I usually turn it upside down. I turned it upside down. How about that way? For those of us who actually read English, up, right side up. Yeah. Exactly, we need the Braille as well. So now if you read the document this way, you'll notice that if you prepare for a power outage, you are partially preparing for many disasters. If you prepare for disruptions to food and water and cooking, you're partially preparing for many disasters. We don't have a lot of control over the disasters, but we have a great deal of power and control over how we respond to the disruptions they cause. So if it doesn't matter whether the power outage was caused by a fire, a flood, a backhoe, or your 16-year-old daughter backing into a pole. I have 11 kids, by the way, and I have a 17-year-old daughter. She has not yet backed into the pole, hopefully. But it doesn't matter what caused the disaster. Simply prepare for the power outage. And if you will prepare for a few disruptions, it no longer matters what disaster comes your way. Does that make sense? Okay, that is like the thing that I want you to remember. Stop preparing for disasters, because disasters cause FUD, the fear, uncertainty, and doubt. When we focus on disruptions, it creates empowerment. And that's the point here. Okay, so we're going to put worksheet 1 down and grab worksheet number 2. You'll notice for each disruption on worksheet number 1, you'll have a row. So water, sewer, power, computer, and so on, all the way down these 6 pages. And across the top of the page, you will see a couple of I can speak English, that's not today. You'll see that it spans from 0 to 3 days, 3 days to 2 weeks, and so on. How we respond to disruptions is dependent upon how long the disruption lasts. Let's say for a power outage, right? I may eat all the food in the fridge, play board games with my kids, read a book, and curl up in the fetal position because I don't have high-speed internet. Right, seriously, indoor plumbing is totally negotiable, but if I don't have high-speed internet, I might die. So, you, on the other hand, might turn on the generator or something else, right? We each prepare in different ways. Regardless, both of our strategies will have to change if the power outage lasts for 2 weeks. By that time, the food in the fridge is all, rotten, and the kids are bored with the board game and all those things. So it's going to have to change. So each of us prepares in different ways. I'm going to ask you to think for a second. Are you a maker, a doer, a buyer, or a relationship builder? So a maker might make a DIY solar panel array in the backyard, right? A doer is kind of related, but more kind of like me, right? They're going to eat all the food in the fridge first and read the book. And then you maker, doer, buyer, right? The buyer is going to buy that giant mega kilowatt diesel generator and have it installed. And the relationship builder, he's going to go over to Ed's house and, mooch off of him, right? Because Ed has power. So each of us prepares in different ways, which is why when we make that list of that brochure and then we hand it to somebody, it doesn't really work, right? If you've ever received one of those brochures with a list of things that you need to do, you're like, well, that's 30% useful. But my situation is different. And because all of our situations are different, I can't solve your problems. You can, though, because you do it every day. And our communities can because they do it every day. And we're just going to organize it. Okay, so what we're going to do next, and I promise this is the quietest it's going to be. It's decibel levels definitely going to rise after this. We're going to break into the groups that you're in, and we're going to take a few minutes to brainstorm coping strategies and solutions as a group. So as a group, you're going to choose any one of these disruptions, and then brainstorm things to make it that you would do to deal with this particular disruption. I'm going to be coming around and keeping you on target. I don't know if we have, let's see, maybe some of the executive committees. If you could, for the first minute, if you could just go around from one to a group to another and just encourage them to choose a disruption, doesn't really matter which, that would be super helpful. And if anybody chooses communication, just let me know. All right, so, and there's only one rule. If you hear something useful from somebody on the table, write it down. and if you hear something that's not useful, you can ignore it. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. Let's take 1 minute. All right. So what I love about this workshop is that everybody's talking, which is so much different from most preparation workshops you've probably been to. And you may have run. Remember that the whole thesis behind this workshop is that you and your communities that you serve are preparation experts. They already know all the resources in their community. They know how things work. If you will, so a couple of things you will notice about this presentation. There is no slides. There are no slides. If you're doing slides, you're doing it wrong. Number two, when you do this, especially, I will put this gently, especially if you're a government person, you will feel the overwhelming need to stand up here and to tell everybody what they should be doing and all of the amazing resources that they have, and you should all do this, right? Just don't do that. Now, if you feel that need, that overwhelming need to provide resources, put it on a piece of paper, print it out, and put a copy of those resources on each of the table, and let them know that it's there. And then that way they can glean the resources that are relevant to them that they can write on their own worksheet. Because when we're all done, we have we're going to do a couple more rounds. We're going to have a couple of things. First is a vocabulary to talk about preparation that does not create fear. It creates empowerment. That's number one, probably the most important. Thank you very much. The second is a preparation plan that you actually believe because it's in your handwriting. It's not something that I hand you that you go throw in the trash can after we're all done or think, oh, that was nice. The next thing that you have is the beginnings of your own personalized 72-hour kit. So you'll see that first 3 days, put 0 to 3 days because research shows people don't know that 72 hours is 3 days. It's 3 days, just in case there's unclear about that. When we're all done, you'll notice that first column, there's a little dotted line. You go through that first column, and everything down all 6 pages, that's the beginning of your personalized 72-hour kit. And then the last thing is, if you'll look at the very last page, you'll see a support system section. As you write down coping strategies and solutions, many of them might involve other people. Your veterinarian, your pediatrician, your neighbor down the street. And every time you have somebody else who's part of your support system, write their names down, and on this very high-tech piece of paper that does not require batteries to work, or a clicker, you will then have their contact information written down and available when you need it the most. For me, if you can read print, yes. For me, right, I can tell you my childhood phone number, but I can't tell you my wife's cell number because it's in my cell phone. Right. So anyway, it's useful to write it down sometimes. Okay, another thing I want to point out. The first scale that I mentioned is the time frame. Just below that, you'll see external disasters on one side and family and personal disasters on the other. There will be some disruptions, like medical disruptions. And you'll start planning out a little ways, and you're like, well, 6 months? I mean, what am I going to do? Turn my house into an OR or something? I don't know. The further out that you get, you can shift your thinking a little bit to the family and personal disasters. Generally speaking, external disasters, like the hurricanes or the floods or the atmospheric rivers, those will have high impacts over the short term with diminishing effects over the long term. And in general, the family and personal disruptions will have low impacts on any given day, but have very high impacts over the long term. So, for example, I've got a son who has an undiagnosed neurological issue. On any given day, it is not an emergency, but it has had an enormous effect on almost every aspect of our life and where we live and how we live and the decisions that we make. It really shapes everything. So, if you're doing like medical disruptions, for example, and you get out here to the 6-month time frame, the answer for here might be like get medical insurance, or go back to college to get a job that can provide you medical insurance, for example. So I just want you to think in that way. If you get stuck, the further out you go, think in terms of family and personal disasters and disruptions rather than the more immediate external disasters. Okay, so we have time for a little bit of reporting out. I'm going to randomly call on, let's see, table number 22. They have numbers on these tables, so wonderful. Table number 22. Oh yeah, you just got voluntold. All right, very quickly here. Which disruption did you discuss? Oh, you definitely need it.
Heating and cooling
Heating and cooling on page
on page 4.
4. Okay, everybody turn to page 4 real quick. Please share a couple of the things that you brainstormed about heating and cooling. And if you hear something useful, write it down. And if you hear something that's not useful, you can ignore it.
So about heating and cooling, getting the word out there about the cooling centers, and then also we utilized our time and talked about what avenues have we used when it gets cold. When it gets hot. So ice packs, different things, and there's little portable ACs that you can use with battery packs. As soon as we see the forecast, start putting your ice packs in the freezer, utilizing the heat, because finding places where you can go and cool down, shaded areas. One of our team members here mentioned if there's no heat to warm up your water, they have used taking the water outside and in the heat, making that warm up. So then you could take a warm bath just with that heat.
That's great, yeah. And there are little bags, black bags of water that you can put in the sun that'll heat up as well. Yeah, yeah.
A couple of things is, talking to our neighbors, seeing who has the ACs that are using, communicating prior to this heat wave. And then also in the heat, you could take things off, cool down, and then getting in different areas in the house, so that way you're not utilizing so much heat in other places.
Awesome. I will point out that out of all of the suggestions that she just shared, a very small minority required you to go out and buy something, right? This is not about going out and buying stuff. These are coping strategies and solutions, and that involve doing and making and buying and relationship building, all of the above. Yeah, so thank you. Were there any other suggestions on heating and cooling anybody wanted to add?
Fans.
Sand?
Fan.
Fans make a lot more sense than sand. Well, although my undergrad's in architecture, and the first thing that came to mind was like, oh yeah, well that makes perfect sense. But anyway, from an architectural standpoint. Yes?
We when the power goes out, or actually we have power, but when we can't heat our water, we have a little nozzle on a hose in our bathroom that will heat the water as it comes through the nozzle. Oh. And we can take warm showers, not hot, but warm, even if we don't have hot water in our hot water heater.
That's pretty cool. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Here,
Sure.
Thank you. We utilize camping equipment oftentimes, so it's a lot less expensive for you to buy a camp stove and a little canister of propane than investing in a generator or backup battery. And camp stoves, you can heat up your food, you can heat up the water for bathing in, for cooking, all of that kind of stuff that comes in handy.
All right, so okay, one more, and then we'll move to the next round.
I was just going to share, I actually was in the Northwest during that heat wave, spending the night in a greenhouse of all places. So one of the things I did, which I actually repeated this summer, is use ice packs. So for me, the biggest challenge is actually in the evening, not during the day, because often where you're staying or at our own home, in El Cerrito is actually a lot warmer than it is outside. So just getting an ice pack out and using that while you're trying to go to sleep.
That's awesome. All right, so we're gonna repeat this process one more time. So here's what we're gonna do. If you are wearing glasses today, I'm gonna have you stand up and move at least 2 tables away and find a new table. Then and we're gonna try to, 4 or 5 per table is great, because any fewer, then there's not enough people to talk. Then once you sit back down, choose another disruption. It can be the same one that you've done in the past, or you can do a new one, but we'll do that nice and fast. So go ahead, if you're wearing glasses, stand up and find a new table, at least 2 tables away. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it up.
I know there's been stress in the past between that services.
All right, so we're gonna have time for one more round, but I want to go through a couple of pointers before we do musical chairs again. Let's see here. Okay, you'll notice on worksheet number 2, there's a list of things, list of random items down the left side. Those are conversation starters. They're not requirements or anything like that. Sometimes you might get that question. Next, when you run a workshop like this, because you all totally are going to, is 10 people are really the minimum number to make this work. If you have fewer than 10 people, you just don't have, the engagement. At about 25 people, the room really starts to buzz, and, things are fun at about 25 people, but 10 minimum. Groups of 4 to 6, any fewer than 4, and there just isn't enough engagement. Any more than 6, and you get some wallflowers that can't really communicate. Then you'll notice that we do the musical chairs and get people moving up and around. Now, the musical chairs has a couple of benefits. It keeps everything kind of fresh, and importantly, this is by design, you get to meet new people. And as you're running this for your community, remember the 2 components of preparing for everything. Number 1, prepare for disruptions, and number 2, prepare together. And again, the act of preparing together is an act of resilience. Meeting people in your community, creating those relationships is a part of the process and why we do it this way. It's why it isn't just like a Zoom meeting or something, right? You probably got to know new people and, develop stronger relationships. And so this is the model, this is why we do it that way. Also, if you have an alpha male in your meeting, that one guy who just won't stop talking, and it usually is a guy, let's be honest. And just will monopolize it. Just make sure that you move him around each time, and it's a win-win-win, right? I win because he's not totally tanking one of my groups. The group wins because they don't have to listen, to the same person over again, and he wins because he gets a brand new audience every time. Now, for the record, I haven't seen any alpha males here or anything, but just a pointer, pro tip. Okay. The workshop, again, gives you that vocabulary, that 72-hour kit, a way to talk about disasters that does not create FUD, and, importantly, relationships. Strong relationships in your community. That's what we're doing and why we're doing it. When you facilitate, remember, your role is facilitator, not expert. Some of the best facilitators have no idea of anything about preparation at all. Imagine for a second that instead of letting you talk and share ideas, that I decided to come up here and do a half-hour presentation on how to make rabbit traps out of sticks. You would probably not be as happy with me right now. So just remember that, follow the golden rule of presentations, right? Never give a presentation that you would want to sit through. Your role will be facilitator, not expert. It's also the reason why I don't just like sit down at a table. I'd love to do that. I'll go sit down at a table and then immediately everybody will just stop talking and look at me. I'm like, no. That's not the point, right? So expert, you're not the expert, you're the facilitator. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to get through. So we have time for one more quick round. So if you were born in July through December, go ahead and stand up. I'm not gonna pick on the last two people. And find the table at least 2 tables away, at least 4 per table. And we'll do it one more time. All right, let's go ahead and wrap it back up. Bring it back. This is my favorite part of the facilitation, where it's loud, right? Like, this is how you know you're doing it right.
I think I'm very important for all this information that she's educating.
All right, so for this last part, I'm going to cover a couple more things very quickly, and then we're going to do something called buzz groups. And buzz groups are amazing, and I'll teach you how to do it here in just a second. Okay. Number 1, digital copies. If you want digital copies, yes, you're welcome to. On the bottom of worksheet 2, very bottom, in very small print that is definitely not accessible. Thank you. That was just for you, by the way. You'll find my email address. Just send me an email and just say, hey, I was in your workshop. Can I have the digital copies? And I will email them to you. I used to just make them available online for everybody, but then what would happen is that people would use them to teach the traditional FUD-filled lectures, and I realized that the value is not in the worksheet itself, but in the approach. And so what I just say is, like, look, if you have a copy of the book, you read the book, or you've been through a workshop, absolutely. I'm happy to share those.
I love this.
Awesome. Well, I'm also glad you're giving me a hard time, because that's how I know you like me. Okay, next, adaptation for institutional disruptions. As you'll see, this is designed for family and personal disruptions. You can take this approach, and I think you should, and adapt it for institutions. So institutions do not have emotional and spiritual needs. Their employees do, but the institution itself doesn't. So you can take the disruptions and replace them with disruptions to the institution. The quickest, easiest way to do that is to take a list of everybody's job titles and then look at what those departments do. Those are your disruptions. And you can replace the key disruptions, and then do something very similar with your employees. You can do it by location, for example. I would certainly recommend doing interdepartmental, but you can do that. Let's see here. Then the book. Let's see. There's also a communications worksheet I will send you. Those of you who did communications, I went over this with you, but this kind of brings a little bit of sanity to the discussion about communication, which creates a lot of FUD. I won't go over that right this second, though. As I mentioned, I'm the author of How to Prepare for Everything, so the book is available on Amazon. I brought 5 copies. We'll do a raffle here in a second, and it goes over everything that we went over today, and a lot more. And it's an easy read. I made sure. Then we're going to do buzz groups now, and then
doesn't have accessibility stuff in the Kindle.
No, not yet, because Kindle is hard. It is really hard. And you know what else is hard? Doing an audiobook too, because I have tables and oh my gosh, doing tables accessibly.
I didn't ask you that when you noticed.
Yes, I did notice. Okay, we're going to do buzz groups now. And after the buzz groups, we'll then come back and we'll do the raffle. Here's how a buzz group works. You're going to split up into a group of 2, exactly 2. And if you're at a table of 3, I'm going to have you move to another table of 3, even it out. One of you is going to be Alice, and the other is going to be Bob. You can decide who's Alice and Bob. One of you is going to be Alice, one of you is going to be Bob. And then I'm going to ask you a few open-ended questions. I'm going to ask you, how do you feel? Just a wide open question. How do you feel? And then Alice is going to turn to Bob. And for 1 minute, just answer the question. How do you feel? And then after a minute, it will be Bob's turn, and Bob will turn to Alice and answer the question. So we'll do this, we'll repeat this for 3 questions. The questions I'm going to ask, and don't worry, you don't have to memorize them, I'll tell you, is how do you feel? What did you learn? And what do you plan to do next? So I'll coach you through this, but that's how we're going to do it. All right, so if you're at a table of 3, one of you get up and walk to another table of 3 so that you are evened out. Pick a partner, decide who's going to be Alice and who's going to be Bob.
Hey, Alice.
All right. Let's go ahead and bring it back. Now, what I love about buzz groups. This is what I love about buzz groups. What I love about buzz groups is that in a large audience where everyone participates, over the last hour or so, you've learned a lot, and everybody's head is, you're kind of swimming, you've got lots of ideas, and when you bring it back to a group and kind of get group input, if you don't have time to kind of process it a little bit, the comments that you get may not be exactly on point. I don't know if you've ever kind of led a discussion and you get that. Buzz groups allow everybody to kind of process what we've learned in a very short period of time. So that's why they're magical, and I just love it. That, and I love the conversation. So I'll just open it up for a couple of minutes. What did you learn? How do you feel? And what do you plan to do next? We'll just take a couple of comments. Yes, right up here. I got him.
I feel better than I did when I first got here.
Awesome. I can go home happy now. All right, other comments? Yes.
I'm teaching disaster psychology to a teen CERT group, and I'm going to use this document rather than this one.
Awesome. Make sure you read it the right way, right? Okay, right over here. Yes.
I have learned so much about what the VOADs actually contribute to the community, and I wasn't aware. I am new to our organization's disaster team and just, had anxiety about, okay, how does this fit? How do I take back and, be able to implement this with our team? But I'm super excited. I've learned so many great things and realized that we do have some great resources already at our fingertips, but now I can expand on that and really develop, greater relationships. So
awesome, and you're going to learn even more for the rest of the day.
Yay.
All right, one more comment. Where was it? Even?
Right, Frank.
Oh, yeah, sorry, right up front. Here we are.
How do you feel? What did you learn? What do you plan to do next?
I feel really relieved that there was Central Valley folk here in the room. I was afraid I'd be the only one. What did I learn? Well, we're a new VOAD team in Fresno County, so I mentioned to my Alice, because I chose to be Bob, he was Alice, that the first meeting was a little bit overwhelming. I walked away still not fully understanding what I was signing up for, so what I'm going to do next is go back to our second meeting and feel a lot more prepared.
Over here. All right. Thank you all for having me, and I hope you learn a lot. Time. What I really loved about this, so much engagement with each other. And I know that when you were going through many of the questions, I found everybody had done different options. And so my concern was that we were going to have, in the disruption, everybody was going to do the same thing. But when I went from table to table, I didn't find any duplicates. So congratulations on that. We're going to get ready for lunch here in just a moment. And I just want to say, Aaron, thank you. Aaron has traveled from Colorado to be with us, and we're so glad that he's here. And he did such a great job.
And yes, I actually have 11 children.
Yes, I can vouch for that. And I have met the 17-year-old, and I'll pray for you. Yeah.
Park fire, which impacted 4 counties in Northern California, but destroyed homes in Butte and Tehama counties. And we were able to use VisionLink to assist households in Tehama County. We were able to use it at our local assistance center, which was amazing because we were able to give each resident, each person that came in, an ID number, and they didn't have to tell their story every single time they came to a table. We were able to just pull up that ID number and see which resources were given to community members. And then, since the fire has not been federally declared yet, we're now able to provide a disaster case management service and software to our disaster case managers so they can do the work while we're waiting for a federal declaration that we don't know if we're going to get or not. So it's super useful, super amazing, and we were able to call into Northern California VOAD and say, hey, there is a need here. Another VOAD outside of our region said, we can help meet that need, and that's just the power of VOAD. So thank you so much to Cadre. Thank you so much to Kevin Cox and his team for being able to provide this service to Butte and Tehama counties, because this just helped our disaster case managers hit the ground running to help our community members recover that much quicker. So that's just our testimony about VisionLink, and we were super excited to be able to utilize it and get the ball rolling, because we don't have time to waste when it comes to helping our community members recover.
The beauty, thank you very much, and we're going to have a special performance here for you in just a moment, but I just want to tack on something real quick, a 1 minute here. What Marcia brought to us is we saw the vision of what it could do, hence VisionLink, and it was developed as a case management software, but now what we've been able to do, we took it one step even further. We've now developed to be used in local assistance centers where we're collecting the information. We do have an MOU that we do with the local county. We can hand off the information to the local county on assistance, or excuse me, we actually do put a dollar amount to the assistance, but we can show them what the local level of disaster damage they had. It's got a lot of creative benefits to it, but we do not give government access to the files. So all the information is well protected, but we just give a report. And that's also done through an MOU. The other thing, working with Marcia, what we've been able to do is we have put together a construction component. So now on the backside, as I'm a builder, as a builder, we put our information into what's going on. We get all the quotes, all the information, and the case managers who start with the client and end with the client, they are able to jump over to the construction side, and they can inform their clients where they're at in their process, in their recovery, in the rebuilds. And I just think it's been such a phenomenal, being an old timer, what I get excited about, this has probably advanced us more in the last 3 years than we have in the last 25 that I've been in part of the VOAD. But the other thing that I want to just to help you understand is every agency gets to retain their own data. And that is the beautiful part of what we've been able to accomplish with this. And Marcia doesn't get enough credit. This is something that is absolutely huge and a huge benefit. If you want to find out more about it, we'd love to talk to you ahead of time. Reach out to one of our VOAD members and we can get connected on that. And so at this time, I want to invite up 3 individuals. I want to invite Valerie Mohanovich, Zach Corbo, and Dave Reid, if he's here somewhere. And we're going to have you sit up here at the panel. And I'd like to welcome you because, as it was mentioned earlier today, we are the gap. It starts with us, it ends with us and the volunteers. And our government is limited to what they can provide. That's why we need a partnership. They need us as much as we need them. And working together, we're able to accomplish what we haven't been able to do for years. So I'm going to turn it over to these guys. And let me just do another quick introduction for you all. This is Zachary Corbo. Zachary is with the private sector in NGO. Yeah. Zach has been a big help to us, especially in the cleanup phase as we are going into some of these communities. This is Valerie Mohanovich, who is our state val. Yeah. We love her dearly, yes, thank you all. She's also part of the Trinity. And this is Dave Reid from Santa Cruz, and he's with the emergency management. So, Pamela, we're going to turn it over to you. You can start with your presentations. Sorry.
Good. No, thank you so much. Appreciate the introduction. Thank you. I thought I had 6 more minutes, but I appreciate starting early because I like to talk a lot. So now I get 21 minutes. Buckle up. So as introduced, my name is Zachary Corbo. I have the pleasure of working at Cal OES, specifically within the Office of Private Sector and NGO Coordination, which my boss, Abby Browning, likes to lovingly refer to as external affairs on steroids, because all of our partners essentially are partners that we don't pay, that don't actually have to do anything that we ask them to do, and we ask a lot of them. And I think it's a lot more fun that way. If you're non-governmental, you're a partner of ours. And it's everything from the Walmart, the Home Depot, the Lowe's, is it Vons here? Safeway, okay, so it's all the same. Different logo on the building. Everything from our private sector partners to a non-governmental. All of you in the room, likely, who represent a non-governmental agency, a CBO, an FBO, you're a partner of ours too. And why that matters is that because I work for you. My whole team, our entire job, is to coordinate with you and share information before a disaster, during a disaster, and help assist with recovery in any way that we can. And we do that a couple of different ways. For those who are familiar with our activation name, if the State Operations Center is activated, we may turn on the Business Operations Center. Who's familiar with the Business Operations Center or the BOC? Hey, that's not too bad. It means we're doing our jobs. For those that you aren't, there's quite literally a room in the State Operations Center up in Sacramento at Cal OES, and our job is to sit there and gather information and share it with our partners. We have this nice long listserv that if we're activated and we're distributing daily reports, you will receive essentially the same information that our government partners do related to the disaster. The size of the fire, the road closures, status proclamations and declarations. There's some of these reports end up being dozens and dozens and dozens of pages long, and we strip out all the stuff that you don't need or care about. That's also, protected government information. You don't need to know. I don't need to know most of that stuff. So we save that information, we cut it out, and we share a report. So if you're not on and have never received the Business Operations Center's situation reports, I have a stack of cards. Take one, email me, or just give me your email address and I will add it. I can do it today. And then the next time the State Operations Center is activated or the Business Operations Center is activated, you'll receive that information. So that's just one of the easy ways that we're able to share information with you, our partners. And that is also bidirectional. So we will share a bunch of information with you, but if you as a non-governmental or a private sector partners have questions about what's going on, where can we help? Has a state of emergency been declared? Has FEMA been requested? Just ask. Again, we work for you. That's our job. If we don't have the answer in the BOC, we will walk over to the person in the State Operations Center that has the question. Some examples of that is if a fire is in your area and you happen to have a very critical piece of your infrastructure as an organization, this is typically on our private sector side, we may not know about that. Our fire commanders may not know about that. It's probably buried in some plan somewhere. We had a large healthcare organization a couple of years ago that had a data center near a fire area. They casually called us and said, hey, just so you know, if that building goes down, we lose 50% of our patient information. So we'd really like that not to go down. So we walked over to the fire desk and we said, did you know that nondescript building over there happens to be a data center? Because you don't put markings on data centers because then they become targets. The fire commander said, I don't think we knew that. We were going to make extra protections around that building then. On the nonprofit side of the world, I think what we try and do is share information to ensure that you have what you need to provide services. If that's when road closures occur, evacuation numbers, we get very interested. number of structures destroyed or damaged. We have that information, and if it's releasable, we will release it to you. I know some organizations make their operational decisions based on that. If it's releasable, we will share it to you. Sometimes the information we have is ballparks at best, submitted through local governments who are trying to understand the scale of their disaster. They'll send us a number. We say, this is what we think we have in terms of destroyed structures. We go, okay, good to know. That's not always the most accurate until it's further validated. The other thing that we do in my office is we run the state's Emergency Support Function 17. For those who don't know what ESFs are, because you don't really need to, and it's another acronym, I feel like I need to put $1 in a jar every time I use an acronym. I'm paid by the government, so I don't only have so many dollars in my pocket. But Emergency Support Function 17 is volunteer and donations management. Effectively, what that means is anything related to volunteers or the management of in-kind or financial donations goes through my team. We share some of these responsibilities with our partner agency, Calfornia Volunteers, but effectively, when the State Operations Center is activated or during preparedness or during recovery, we help manage some of those relationships. Why I bring this up is because we have a new program that started about a year ago now that's still in its beta stage. It's the California In-Kind Donations Portal. A number of years ago, there was this big pandemic. You probably read about it in the newspapers. That's all the laughs I get for the COVID pandemic? I mean, that was a decent joke. So that's right, exactly. We're still recovering from lunch. So during COVID, typically the state's position on donations is we don't accept them. The state does not need to accept goods. We have a government credit card. We will swipe the government credit card. Oh, there we go. Look at that. Thank you so much. Sushi, everybody. Wow. This is actually really cool. That's incredible. Thank you. Oh, this has Listos logo on it, so technically I paid for this. Joking. I know, we collectively as taxpayers. But the California In-Kind Donations Portal is this really neat software. It was thrown together during COVID because all the rules went out the window. The government did, in fact, need to accept donated goods from private businesses because we needed everything and we couldn't get it fast enough to serve our citizens. What was determined is that we really should probably have something in place, planning, to mitigate this disaster if there's ever a large-scale incident or a decent-sized incident. So what we've developed through legislation and some funding is the California In-Kind Donations Portal. And it provides the opportunity for private sector partners and nonprofits to offer things in a disaster. It's built on top of Salesforce, so it works pretty well and it integrates with a lot of our other products. But we are currently in a beta stage, so we're enrolling our operational area county partners to ensure that they have access to the offers when they come through. What this may mean for you as a nonprofit or as a local government is we oftentimes during big disasters get offers of things from big corporations that you know quite well. What we're trying to do is have them centralize into one system. I want to offer you a truckload of this. I want to offer you a pallet of that. Put it in this system. Our OAS team takes a look at it and says, yep, that seems like a valid donation. We don't think we need any more information. If we do, we'll kick it back and say, hey, how many pallets? How many products are on that pallet? Are you going to deliver it? Because you can send me a truck, but if I can't receive it, what's good is the truck. We will then, once we release it, we send it down to the operational area that's impacted by the disaster. It is then incumbent on our OA partners, our county partners, to say, okay, we don't think we need this as a government. Perhaps our local VOAD could use a truckload of cleaning supplies. So this is where I foot stomp that you need to have a working relationship with your county operational area emergency management agency. And I want to give a special shout out to the emergency management agencies in the room. I know it's often difficult to prioritize attending some of these day-long conferences when we have 1,000 things going on and not a very big team. So much appreciation to the government agencies who are here. I also know it's very hard as a nonprofit to find funding to sometimes attend to these, either to travel or to lodge overnight. So if you have questions about our in-kind donations portal, feel free to come snag me. Like I said, I have a big stack of cards. We're not yet enrolling private sector or nonprofit partners, but we can get you on a list of those who can receive that information when it starts going out. We want to make sure our government partners can access it before we start inputting those offers. So that's the California in-kind donations portal. One of the cool things about that is actually written in the legislation is if you're a private business and you offer a good and is accepted by the county or the local government, there's then a liability shield that's baked into the legislation. So one of the concerns we often hear from our private sector is, if I give you a thing and that thing ends up going wrong, will I get sued? Probably. This is California. So in the legislation is some level of liability protection for them. Obviously, it's a little new, so it hasn't all been worked out on the regulation side of the world, but it's one of the cool parts. The other thing that we do in our office is we are the gateway for philanthropy. We have a relationship with Philanthropy California. Again, the state does not take in private dollars. If a big corporation or a mom and pop shop or a random Joe citizen wants to donate to the disaster, they frequently go to the state and they say, the state, here's my check. Government does not need your money unless it's the IRS or the FTB. We don't like taking your dollars. We're also not the best at spending them at the most local level. That really should be done by a local community foundation. So what we do is if a local community foundation exists and they've opened a disaster fund, Philanthropy California will vet that fund and then place it on their active current disaster fund website, and that's what we promote. If the local government says, hey, this is the fund that we want you to promote, we will promote that. So again, we are often asked to promote things through our channels and our lists. Of course we will. We promote one thing, Philanthropy California. It's the one page that has all of the different funds. This is my plug for having a relationship with your local community foundation in advance of the disaster. They're not frequently a partner that thinks that they need to come to these events or is often invited to the disaster table. And this isn't the case in every county or every city. Some of them have really strong relationships. But you as a nonprofit, or if you're a local government, if you have a local community foundation, step one, Google area community foundation. One of the three things that Kevin said that you need to write down, this is one of those. If you don't know whether you have a local community foundation, find out. Number two, do they do a disaster fund? Have they ever done that before? Is there a written agreement about a disaster fund? What does that look like after a disaster? If they've done it before and they do it well, great. Check the box. If they don't and you're a local government, figure out how you work with them to develop a disaster fund after the disaster. Because large organizations frequently have these great mechanisms to take in dollars. Our friends at the Red Cross are excellent at public relations when it comes to, if you want to help the disaster, donate to the Red Cross. You can push a button at the local Walmart, you can text in, absolutely incredible ability to get the word out there. What I like to do is say, that's awesome, donate to the Red Cross, big fan, they do incredible work. But also your local community foundation probably wants your dollars too. Those local community foundations are often a lot better at getting dollars out to local organizations than some of the larger foundations or national organizations. It's just baked into their ethos as a community foundation. How many of you are in areas that have a local community foundation? Yes, big fan. Oftentimes, in a lot of cases, it's the local United Way, and they are experts. I'm not just saying that because they helped pay for this year conference, but United Way of Northern California has done this. They do it well, and I happen to know that they're usually pretty good about sharing their successes with other United Ways or community foundations. As we've talked about a ton, we have a couple of areas in California that have experienced disaster at a disproportionate rate, which means they've learned a lot. They're often really good at sharing what they know. So if your local community foundation has never done a disaster fund, or your local United Way doesn't really know how that might work, phone a friend. steal their good ideas and say that they were yours. Because at the end of the day, it's really the survivor that benefits from somebody else's successes. Just trying to make sure I don't forget all these really exciting things I wrote down. So moving from what my office does to some takeaways that I want you to take away from my experience in disaster. The first thing is, whether you're a nonprofit or your local government, what is your volunteer and donations management plan? When was the last time you looked at that plan? Are all the partners that you say are going to do things in that plan aware that you said you were going to do them? Probably not. When is the last time you trained or exercised your current plan? Did you include the stakeholders that you said had responsibilities in your plan in said training and exercise? Maybe, maybe not. Not every county, not every local government is or is not good at that. But I think that's one of the takeaways I'd have for nonprofits. If you operate in a single service area or a region, pull some of those plans. They're public documents. Take a look and see what the local government has said it will do in volunteer and donations management in a response to a disaster. That is their plan. It is a public document. If you have comments on that plan, reach out to the local government, and maybe when they do a rewrite, suggest some of those things. Don't assume that your local emergency management knows who you are or what your capabilities are. Some large organizations, we know, they have television commercials, they put their names on billboards, we know them, we love them. If you don't have a relationship with your local emergency management, during a disaster, they're either going to forget that they've met you before or not remember what your capabilities are. They may recognize a logo, they may recognize a name. This is one of those takeaways. Have a one-pager on what your organization is and could do that's ready to fly during a disaster. This is land of the government. We love one-pagers, which usually end up becoming one each side. It's 2 pages. Technically, it's not a 2-pager. I'm just saying. So that's one of my key takeaways. If you could be a well-established, recognized organization, or you could be a local organization that wants to get into the disaster space, if you can't explain what you're going to do in a disaster on 1-2 pages, you might want to think about condensing down your operational goals anyways, but have that ready to fly for me during a disaster. If I'm a local government responding to a big scale emergency, I have about 1,000 things to do. I wish that was an exaggeration because the state needs things from me, and that's a priority. My local governments need things from me, and potentially there's dozens of local jurisdictions, all with certain needs and wants. And then I have electeds that have needs, wants, desires, and plans. That is all. This is the unfortunate job of the county emergency management. I'm sure Dave will speak to it later. Everything flows through them, which then means they get all the problems. We ask a lot of them as a state, and their local jurisdictions ask a lot of them. You as a local nonprofit or even a national or international organization, just understand they have 1,000 things going on. So I beg of you on their behalf for patience, but persistence. It's not personal when they don't return your phone calls. It's not personal when they don't respond to your emails, but be persistent. Because that thing that you're trying to offer may actually be a need that I have. You just have to remind me that you exist. That's why, if you don't have a VOAD, help build one. I want to make a real strong plug. I've seen communities responding to a disaster that have a VOAD, and I've seen them when they don't have a VOAD. And let me tell you, this is my own personal opinion, it looks a lot better when there is a VOAD. Like I said, I've seen it when there isn't, and I've seen it when there is. And having to build the VOAD ship while you're leaving the harbor of the disaster, it never goes well. Because you end up leaving organizations out that really should have been at the table, or you don't really get the full spectrum of what's going on. It just doesn't go well. I think the Tale of Two Disasters is a good example from earlier. I spent some time in Florida quite recently responding to the hurricanes, and the area that I was deployed to did not have a VOAD. And let me tell you, I wish we did, because we had to build it while the water was rising, and it doesn't go well. It went fine, it didn't go great. One of the other points I wanted to make sure to mention in my remaining couple of minutes is trust but verify. There will always be needs after a disaster. We will hear about them, the media will cram them down our throats, but verify what those needs are before you load up your truck. If you call me with a 53-foot truck of stuff and you're already en route, I'm not going to be happy about it. I got some of those calls recently. I know some of our counties get those calls frequently. Don't load up your truck full of stuff based on what you think people need and then expect me to deal with it when it arrives in my operational area or into our state. It's incredible that people spend their time, effort, treasure, and talent to support survivors after a disaster, and we likely need some of those things in this truck, but rarely do we need everything that you think the county or the local operational area needs or the survivors need. So before you load up the truck, before the truck leaves the station, have a conversation with who's going to receive the truck, or whatever it is you may be. I think I want to give a shout out to Valerie Brown's point earlier. Before you deploy into an area, trust that there probably is a need, but verify what that need is and where you need to go. Because for all you know, the call that I just took before you called me was another organization saying, I can do the same thing you can, and I'm going to go to this area. If you didn't call me, I'm not going to tell you that you wouldn't know that. The final point I wanted to make before I pass it over to our illustrious State Val is be welcoming to those pop-up organizations, because oftentimes they represent and they look like the community that was ravaged by the disaster. If your county or area frequently has disasters in a certain part of your county, your partners usually look like the survivors in that part of the county. If you happen to have a disaster in a different part of the county, a more urban area or a more rural area, the partners don't always look like the survivors. That then means the survivors may not trust you, but they're going to trust these pop-up organizations because they're probably their neighbors. They're probably the folks that they went to school with. And I know it can be difficult to work with pop-up organizations for liability reasons, for you don't know what their capabilities are, you're worried about some of their operations. Take them under your wing, because we have seen that they are incredible powerhouses that want to do the best for their community. But they're not always welcome at the VOAD table in every area. You can help bring them under your wing. I've seen it happen both ways, where they were welcomed and they weren't. This is my plea to you in my final 30 seconds that expired a minute ago. This is my plea to you, is to, if they're a reputable organization and they seem to be doing good work, bring them under your wing, because at the end of the day, the survivors will really appreciate it. That's all for me.
Great, exactly. A lot of really great information there, and I have several comments, but I'm going to save those for our question and answering. What we're going to do, we're going to pass it over to Valerie, and then Dave, what we're going to do, we've got a little thing that we're going to throw here. We're going to separate between the state and the county. So after Valerie's done, get your questions ready, because we're going to do questions with our state, and then we're going to turn it over to Dave and then allow you to have questions with the local EMA. So does that make sense? Great, great. And Zachary, my apologies for just handing you a mic to tell you to go. You know, I got shamed for that. So I need to do a better job at emceeing here. So I want to introduce you once again to our state Val, who we all truly love. And it has made working in California so much better when you have a Val who understands. She was one of us. She came from her background was from volunteer organizations, and she'll tell you more about that. But
what is a Val? What's a Val?
Now, thanks, Zach. Sorry. Hang on. I'm going to pay it forward because I know I'm going to mess up. Mike's going to be, let me get off the stage because it's their time. Our voluntary agency liaison from the state, and I have been working with Vals for over 25 years. Nobody does it better than our Valerie Mohanovich. Valerie?
Is my mic hot? Did I have a PowerPoint with this one, Adriana, or is that come? Oh, cool, because I have to apologize. I've been on vacation for a week and a half, and I came back late Friday night, helped my son move out over the weekend, so I'm like totally off the wall in this presentation, but I usually am anyway. That's my normal stuff, and I can't sit still. So, thank you, Zachary, because really, we work as a team here, so, and we rely on each other a lot when we're overwhelmed. And so I know most of you, but man, I heard Seamless Obispo, Monterey folks I haven't met yet from VOAD, so please, if I find you, whatever, say hi, and anybody else I haven't met, because I try to know as many people as I can in this job. So, my background, just for a minute here, is Kevin. This little forward. Okay, got it. So, my background is most of my career has been in non-profit world, begging for scraps, begging for money. I know what it's like to be in your shoes. I know what it's like to offer these great services for the community. I ran Sacramento Region VOAD since its beginning in 2005, all the way till I left for the state during COVID in 2020. And it was really hard to leave nonprofit world, and I don't think I ever have, because I'll work for the state, but I'm always saying we when I'm talking about all of you. We this, we that, and everybody reminds me, you're us, you're the state. But you're always in my heart. What you do is really important, and my job as the voluntary agency liaison is to know what you do and put the spotlight on all of you and sing the praises of what all of you are doing in the community. That's what's important. And in any way that I can possibly help find funding, find grants or whatever, I'm there. I've been begging far too long for money to sustain the programs I used to run. So I know it's hard out there, and you do really good work. And the community is not going to survive in a disaster without what you're doing. Government will tell you 100 times in all their PowerPoints, voluntary organizations are there in the beginning and they're there at the end. But that's a lot of money to help sustain your services in between. So I'm there with you always. So that's kind of a little background on me. And I advocate for you. That's your number one. They probably want to fire me several times for my just like getting on my stupid soapbox to government and others to say, no, but these guys are out there doing this, and this survivors, San Diego, I've had to pitch so many times to our government partners, this is what I'm seeing. These folks are living on a dirt floor. They're back in their mold-ridden homes. We need to get in. And I will yell and I will scream of whatever I can do to try to move any kind of needle I can from government. As you know, government, we don't have much money, but we do our best to help. So that's the role of the voluntary agency liaison. Know that I always want to have your back and I'll be there for you. And if you don't have my contact information, get it. You can ask me any question. I won't pretend that I know it. I'll ask Zachary or somebody else. Debris. How many debris questions do I get? When is debris coming? When, are we going to get a debris mission? All this stuff. I don't know the answer, but like Zachary's saying, we're within 50 feet or so or a building away from the answer. So please fire away. And no question is a stupid question, because I probably asked a million of those. So anyway, that's a little right that way.
That way.
Oopsie, did I go too? I want to do death by PowerPoint. So, was that my first one? I guess so. Individual assistance. So with the state of California, the voluntary agency liaison sits under individual assistance. And when we think of individual assistance, we help individuals. What? Oh, loud. Okay.
No, you're not.
I don't want to be too loud. So we help individuals. We don't have money. We support FEMA when they have an individual assistance declaration, and then our programs go into motion. And we do a lot of pre-disaster coordination and guidance. We do local assistance centers. So outside of the disaster or before a disaster has been declared, the local county would contact Cal OES Individual Assistance for help in coordinating their local assistance center. And that's where we would get our state agencies, insurance, DMV, housing community development, those programs that could be there at your local assistance center. My job, I get the fun job because I get to contact all of you. So don't hang up on me when you see me calling. It means, and I'll run a list to the county. I go, well, you have Suchi, and this is what they provide. And you have United Methodist, and this is what they do. Red Cross, they already know Red Cross. But I mentioned all of our programs, and forgive me if I didn't mention you. But they could be at your local assistance center too, and they offer very valuable programs. Really happy with seeing our disaster case managers lean in more at the local assistance center level, so we can start with a little bit of case work or case management if we get it, and we're really in touch with our survivors at that point. I don't know if I can't remember, it's been 2 weeks trying to remember what was in this PowerPoint, but another really important part of what we do at the local assistance center is very new, Vision Link. And we bring in Kevin with Hope Crisis Response Network. They come with their volunteer resource village resources. And it's a one-stop for you counties. It's one-stop intake of our survivors. So even if you don't get a FEMA declaration, they check in with our system, and it's a system that can't be shared with everybody. You have to have an MOU, and if you're a direct, if you can directly help people like the Red Cross or Suchi and Episcopal, Southern Baptist, others who are there. And we can get them in that system. And the best part about it is you get, oh my God, Kevin, it's only been 2 months. You get a little name tag. Yeah, you get a little name tag as a survivor. So you recognize this, hey, Valerie, how are you doing today? Not number 123, or please tell me your story again, what happened to your house? It's all in Vision Link. So you know before they come to the table what their needs are. Did they lose everything? Did they only have some damage? Were they evacuated so long that all their food has spoiled and they don't have money to pay for it? You know about that ahead of time as you come to your table, and you can really treat them with a survivor-centric, which you all do anyway, focus. So can't say enough about Vision Link and all of you who've been working on that program. It was really successful in Tehama and Lake County recently, and we'd love to see this in more counties. I don't have any stock in Vision Link. I'm just a supporter of our nonprofits that are part of it. So I just want to make that clear. I've been asked that by the state why I keep promoting it. It's like, it's not the system, it's the people behind it. So, but individual assistance, we also keep an eye on our counties. We participate in county meetings. We participate in VOAD meetings. So in blue skies, when and if we ever have them, knocking on any kind of wood possible, I like to be on your VOAD meetings too. So if you don't have me on your list, please add me to it. I'm happy, my name's impossible to spell, so I'm happy to give you my email. I think it's at the end of this too. And then the confusion I didn't know about when I came to the state. I didn't know the difference between individual assistance and public assistance, but individual assistance is people. And in a disaster, we run all the FEMA grant. It passes from FEMA through us, through California Department of Social Services. There's the FEMA programs for disaster case management, and Renee Jackson's in the back. Thank you, Renee, for really making this program great. And when FEMA brings in the funds, we work with all the parties together to get those contracts in place to have faster disaster case management. Also goes for the crisis counseling program that comes through with a FEMA grant. It comes through individual assistance. We basically are the branch that helps survivors, people. Public assistance is all the stuff I get calls about, and I have to figure out where to send it to. But it's more, these are the debris, buildings, infrastructure, schools, sewers, things like that. That's public assistance. which sounds a lot like individual because it's public, but this is stuff, things. And then I think I already went through this, but it's the Val. I can be your contact or anybody's contact, that conduit of information, that conduit of, when I'm on a meeting, I may hear things on the meetings. I may hear needs, unmet needs that I can reach out to other VOAD organizations that are outside your area, help bring them to the table. And Zachary, I appreciate what you said about those pop-up local organizations. They're so important, and they know the survivors, a lot of them. Those are the ones who are one-on-one, have the rapport, and know who's been harmed, who needs help. And I think a lot of VOADs realized this during COVID. I had a huge 150-something VOAD distribution list, but it didn't include a lot of our local churches that fed people. And when feeding was so important, and in so many, Sacramento is such a diverse community that we had various faiths, religion, minority groups, immigrant groups, and they were all out there serving people. And so COVID helped bring them into the fold. And they could, especially when I was in the Emergency Operations Center, hey, Valerie, do you have a connection to the Afghan population? We'd love to get resources out to them. What do you know about the Ukrainian population? Well, they've all been brought into our listserv. So that VOAD, that communication and collaboration among VOADs, just knowing who does what is so important. And that's why VOADs are so important, is that if you meet regularly and you know who does what, you're so far ahead of the game. And I know we've already said that so many times, but part of my job is to know who's doing what in the various communities. So when these questions come up or needs come up, I can help be a connector too. And then, like I said, we're just a critical link between you, the community, and government. And sometimes FEMA isn't always here, or they can't be here. I can also help be that link too and connect you with the various parts of FEMA. So sometimes I feel like I don't know enough when it's on recovery, like I don't have the money and I don't have the resources, but I try my best. And then, like I said, we're in all phases of recovery. And since I've been around, it's always been recovery. So not so much blue sky. There's always something going on in California, which probably it's just the state these days. And then preparedness. I'm just like repeating here. I just realized. So we just do a lot of getting to know who does what, meeting relationships. Staff changes quite frequently, so I always appreciate the handover. Like, I'm retiring now, but I want to introduce you to so-and-so, and please bring them into the fold, and I connect them with NorCal VOAD or SoCal VOAD or wherever they're located. Thank you, Mike. And that's preparedness and response. Again, I help support the local assistance center, volunteer donations management. That's the world I came from. I worked for Volunteer Center, so we were under the our program ran the donations management plan and the volunteer management plan. I know volunteer centers, a lot of them don't exist anymore, so it's been a lot of big challenge on how to manage spontaneous volunteers, but also how to keep and post volunteer opportunities when our communities need help in the recovery phase. So I have a lot of experience in that area because I lived it. And so please reach out to me with how to get volunteer opportunities out there, how to manage volunteers. I know a lot about donations management. Like Zachary was saying, really important to have that plan in place. Who's doing what and how? Really, and I know volunteers is a challenge, donations is a challenge, but the more you have that in challenge, beg, borrow, steal, and then make it local. Did it die? Thank you. And then again, supporting the local assistance center and the Vision Link program and supporting AFN needs. So, does your community, we found out in Monterey County last year, there were languages that I myself hadn't heard of, Mixteco and Zapoteca. I think a couple of the language, Trinki, I'm probably saying it wrong, but we made sure that we got translators, the state did, for those local assistance centers and disaster recovery centers. So we always ask on our local assistance center meetings, what language needs, any other special needs, low reading capability, all those things. And then,
There we go. See, we've hit the end. And during recovery, FEMA Val and I, we help, and Kevin and all our NorCal VOAD partners, we can help you with your long-term recovery group formation. We can help bring in the players when they're needed from outside. We're here to support you, and no matter what. And I try to, I'm still involved with some of our 2020 wildfire long-term recovery groups, so I can pop in. And so I'm always here. So always feel free to ask a question, ask for help, whatever. That's what we're here to do. And and advocate for all of you. Let me know of your needs. Let me know what you're seeing, and we try our best. That's not possible to spell names, so please stay in touch.
So Zachary, you made a comment, and we're going to take a couple questions here in a moment, but it's really important that we point this out. Zachary made a comment about how he gets a phone call about people not vetting their transportation or needs, and then calling up and expecting them to be delivered. But one of the other things is the frustrating part: people calling you up and asking you for transportation. And we have to make sure that in your community, when you say that you want to do a donation drive and you want to send, as Zachary pointed out, not only do you vet it, but you're also responsible for the transportation and where it goes. Don't call the government and expect them to give you the transportation that you need, because that's not their job. We need to make sure that you understand that, because it gets very frustrating for me when I get phone calls saying, hey, I've got all this stuff, but I don't know how to get it there. Well, you should have thought about that before you did that. We talk about used clothing, how we despise that part of it. What we tell people is, if you want to give, go ahead and do a garage sale with your used items, and then give the money over to your community foundation or the Red Cross or the Salvation Army. And then Valerie, one thing I want to point out, our Val has been so committed for 3 years now since she's been in that position. Every Friday, we have a little think tank call. And she has been so dedicated to be a part of that. And 4 or 5 of us get on the line and we talk about solutions for our communities and what can we do to help. So I just wanted to point those out on those two. And then we're going to move to Dave here in just a moment. But questions, please.
How often do you get organizations that have to do with older adults or folks with disabilities, folks with that kind of access and functional needs in the think tank calls? And should more of us be there? I want to make sure that we are there and we talk about accessibility and make sure that things can work for folks.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. I'm sure Valerie will as well. So I think from the state perspective, we're quite fortunate to have within the Cal OES structure an Office of Access and Functional Needs. Vance Taylor is fantastic. So we're fortunate that because we're the state and we are a large agency, we have an Access and Functional Needs team. We have an office. I think there's 8 people. I'm trying to remember. They always have great potlucks because their cubes are right next to ours. I'm wondering who I need to talk to for an invite. But they're great. So that's at the state level, we're fortunate to have both the funding and that as a priority, that we have that. And he has a network of independent living centers and an Access and Functional Needs advisory committee, a statewide Access and Functional Needs advisory committee. So again, at the state, we obviously usually have more resources than the local government does. And I don't know if Dave has anything he wants to add to that question, but that is, from the state perspective, what we would recommend. And local governments can obviously tap into that as a resource.
And I'll just add, as VOADs start up, when we get new VOADs starting up, and I'm helping them with ideas to build their listserv and who should be part of that, I always tell them to go to, okay, I'm going to use an acronym, please. You said it or it spelled it out, CFIL. Okay, CFIL, California
Foundation of Independent Living Centers.
So that's where I tell them to go to make sure you find your local partner and bring them in. And most counties also have an access functional needs specialist, so we bring those into your VOAD as well. So we try to be, that is critical. And seniors as well. Senior organizations are also, area agencies on aging are also really important to have.
So I have a question for you, Valerie, since we don't have any other questions. One, you talked about how funding is really tough at times, and sometimes when we get a federal disaster, there are times we get SBA, and there are times that we don't get the actual declaration for IA, but we may get an SBA. Can you speak to that just a little bit? I knew I was going to do that. Small Business Administration, and that's so confusing because when a survivor gets a letter in the mail from the Small Business Association, it goes in the trash because they don't think that, but that's the disaster loan program for families in need. So Valerie or Dave?
I can speak to it in a little bit more depth when I start my blathering, but on some level, there's an important opportunity now with the SBA where you don't, as you said, you don't have to have the Federal Individual Assistance Declaration to get an SBA declaration. And so there's an effort involved in doing that, and we want to encourage our VOAD members as well as our local government to look into what that threshold is. We were able to achieve it for the 2024 disaster, which only had public assistance declaration at the state level. It gave at least some people the opportunity to get some funding, low interest loans to help them in the recovery space.
Great, thank you, Dave. And I think that it's, how many case managers are in the room? Okay, a few of you. That's why it's so important to know your resources, and knowing whether you have SBA and then how to access that. So moving ahead, I want to introduce one more thing from Valerie.
Thing about SBA, because I learned so much about it in San Diego as well, and I'm not speaking on behalf of SBA, but it is a really important loan. The threshold is, Chris, 25, I think, my partner that did an SB, homes, not businesses, thank you. So the threshold is 25, so it's a lot lower, and they're very, very low interest loans, and you don't have to pay them off right away. And the thing is, what happens is people go, oh, I can't do a loan right now, but then they end up charging up on an 18% interest Visa card. And so you can accept the loan, you don't have to use it. So it's just a really important tool to remember. And currently we have SBA declarations for the Park Fire, that's Tehama, Butte, and Kern counties. For the Burrell Fire, we have it for Lake County. I know I'm going to miss a couple, for the Boyles Fire, Chinatown Fire in LA, and just the city of LA, an apartment that burned. So we do have several SBA declarations right now. And as soon as you get that declaration, they'll open up their assistance center, which I know has a different name, and they'll start business.
Absolutely, and appreciate that, Valerie. We talked about how important it is to make sure that disasters are at the local level and that we are making sure that as we are working together, that our lead, and it looks like we have one more question before I introduce Dave.
Would you address the issue of appealing FEMA and SBA, please? I just think it's important that we address the issue that if they don't appeal, that they have that right. They don't just get a decline and then that's it, that they can appeal it, resubmit, and stay in the loop in case they need it.
Yeah, I think one of the key points to make is FEMA in its taking a lot of feedback from both states and survivors and other organizations made some pretty significant changes to its individual assistance policy this year. So no longer is a survivor required to apply for SBA, Small Business Administration, in order to then receive the other bucket of funding. So in FEMA land, Individual and Households Program, there are two buckets of funding, often referred to by the amount of money you can receive, $43,600 now with the new fiscal year. There are two buckets with $43,600 cap. It used to be you could apply for the first one, you then had to ask SBA for permission, effectively, to apply for the second one. That is no longer the case. They get to move right into the other bucket, which other needs assistance. I will also note on appeals, survivors can appeal any decision FEMA makes on their application once. That individual action you can appeal once. You can submit a dozen appeals, but they would all need to be for individual needs. So we could talk all day, every day about FEMA appeals, but I would make sure that folks, if you are a case manager, you're receiving the most updated possible information about FEMA and its new programs, and working with our individual assistance team at OES, because they are frequently either changing the rules globally, or individual decisions are being made about a certain disaster, and there's sometimes minor policy changes that really matter for the survivor.
Thank you, Zach. And I know that our friend James Coble in our recovery session, we might address a little bit more about that. But I want to introduce Dave Reid to you. Dave Reid is with is in the emergency services in Santa Cruz. As I started to tell you earlier, it's so important for us to be connected to the local EMA. It's so important that in the midst of this disaster that we are working under their leadership and partnering and walking alongside. And so they will ensure that we get connected. So Dave, thank you. I know you've done that very, very well in Santa Cruz, and we sure appreciate you.
Thanks for having me here this afternoon. I'm going to start, since we just had lunch, I'm going to ask everybody to stand up if you don't mind. So the first thing I want to do to the point that was just made, I want to see a show of hands. Who has my cell phone or a counterpart's cell phone in a county so you can communicate directly with the emergency manager or a deputy or somebody? It's a good number of hands. So again, like, I want you to have my phone number. If you live in Santa Cruz County and work in Santa Cruz County, you need to have your emergency management organization's contact information so that you can communicate to that directly to them, because we are imperfect humans in a disaster. To quote Supervisor Gore from Sonoma County, it's relentless, imperfect progress, right? So we heard earlier two of our VOAD seasoned folks in San Diego and Marin County express challenges, even though they've been doing this for a long time, right? It's never a perfect process. So we want to be working forward with all of you. The next thing I want you to do is just put your hand out for a second while I blather on. Okay, I'm not going to talk for too long, but I wanted to do this physical embodiment exercise to just talk about how hard it is to keep your hand out and what it's like to work alone, right? And so one of the themes of this conference and this conversation, right, is how we are better and stronger together. So if I kept talking and I asked you to keep your hand out, it wouldn't take long before people started to get tired. But it doesn't take much effort for me just to go like this. And so just for a practice, take a moment and put your hand on a shoulder, take a step or two, and put your hand on the shoulder of a person next to you. And how much easier is it to keep your hand out if you can rest it on your neighbor, on your friend, on your colleague, right? So that's what this is about, right? What this process, what this conversation is about is how we are stronger together than individually. So with that, I'll let you sit down. Hopefully that's got your blood flowing a little bit so that I can talk a little bit more. So I was asked, to bring things down in elevation to the local level. And so I just want to talk a little bit about our county's journey. Imperfect as it is, I do want to recognize two people in the room and embarrass them a little bit because I'm just a surrogate for what we do at the county. So Annie Puckett and Amanda Gullings, they're going to have to raise their hands or wave. Two amazing people in our small office that do a lot of this work every day. So it's a team. Even on our side, it's a small team. Some of the counties and cities have bigger teams, but we are all under-resourced across the board at the government level. We could always use more people and money to do the work that we do because it's so important. So I wanted to talk a little bit about relationship and coordination in both preparedness, response, and recovery and what we've been doing, and I'll try and give some specific examples. One of the things at the local government level, especially in the emergency management space, we have a lot of state and federal mandates for certain things that we have to do. Things like an emergency operations plan. So the county operational area, which is also sometimes referred to as the OA, we have to have an emergency operations plan that's reviewed by the state. To prepare that emergency operations plan, we need to communicate with our community. We need to get feedback from our community. All of you are part of that fabric. So I want to just reiterate some of these steps that we have to go through and make sure that you start to plug in your communities to some of those processes, because that helps strengthen that relationship, that proximity, that closeness that you will have with all of us at the local government level. Other things like evacuation plans. That's a very common thing here in California. People are developing and jurisdictions are developing evacuation plans. As part of that, we have to reach out and communicate with the public. We have to communicate with all of you And so that's another opportunity where you as an organization, whether as an individual organization or as part of your VOAD, needs to, and we want you to be connected into that process so that we hear your voices, we hear the voices of those that you represent. The other one is like a local hazard mitigation plan. So FEMA requires that every jurisdiction renew their local hazard mitigation plan every 5 years. And there's a number of new state and federal legislative requirements around how much we communicate with our vulnerable populations, many of those that you all serve. So those are some examples. And what we've tried to do in the county is lean into that communication opportunity. If we have to do that as part of developing something, that is an opportunity for us to foster a stronger relationship with the organizations serving our community that are part of our VOAD. So I want to just encourage folks that may not be plugged in to those types of planning efforts that the jurisdictions do to find out how to become a participant and a voice in that process so that that plan is stronger, but also that that relationship is stronger too. The other thing that we do and try and work on, and is an ever-evolving process, is that communication relationship. And I think that was one of the C's in the presentation earlier. And voice amplification, right? So we as government can only reach so far into community. Generally speaking, if you have about 50% of your population registered for your alert and warning system, you think you're winning. And at the government level. And for me personally and professionally, that means I'm missing half of the population when I try and send out an alert that hits your phone or your email or your landline, if you still have one. So it's the trusted voices in the room here, it's the trusted voices in community that are part of the VOAD, that are critical in that voice amplification, hopefully ahead of a disaster, so in the preparedness stage, but also in that recovery and response phase. So all the phases, we need your help, and all of you may have constituencies at the nonprofit or non-governmental organization level. All of you have constituencies that we want to tap into. We don't want to take your contacts. That's not appropriate. But we want to give you the information and have you share that out. So we really try and do that. One example for us is that we've leaned in to a relationship with our largest school district that serves the southern part of our county, about 10,000 plus families. And a lot of those Latinx community members and indigenous language speaking community members, that school district and all school districts generally have about 100% participation in their communication tools, right? If you are a parent and you have a child in school, you for sure want to know if something bad is going on at the school or something good, or there's an opportunity to meet your teacher, whatever the circumstance. So they have 100% subscribership into that population. We want to tap into that communication network. We want to give those resources or that information that we are sharing out to the school district so that they can have that penetration deeper into the community. The other piece that we've been trying to do to honor the work of CBOs and NGOs is to have contracts in place. So in the arc of recovery, so many of us want to stand up and raise our hand and say, we're ready to do the work. And a lot of organizations will pivot their primary mission to do that response work or that immediate recovery work. And that only lasts so long if we, as government, are not compensating you for your time. And so we have tried to recognize, at least at start, a handful of organizations that are important in our community that have the resources to do some of the work in response and have standby contracts with them to outline how much we're going to compensate them for and for what work, so that we know and they know that if we ask them to stand up and serve and support, that they're going to be compensated in the near term, and then we as local government will work on the back end to get reimbursed by FEMA, which is a whole other day-long lecture and the problems of FEMA reimbursement. But we recognize that for community organizations, there's only so much you can do in a voluntary or volunteering basis, not voluntary, but volunteering basis, until your staff need to get paid, they need to eat, your organization still needs to maybe have its continuity of operations work, and so that it's hard to pivot and just do one thing in the disaster space. So we've tried to build those contracts, and if anybody wants to talk about the contracts piece, Annie Puckett is your go-to. couple other thoughts and things to share in terms of the advocacy point side of things and kind of how we advocate for long-term recovery and VOAD development. Those contracts, I think, are a big piece of it because it shows that we are committed to honoring the work that you are all doing. Another piece is we have tried to, and it's not enough, at the local government level, identify some consistent grant funding. So there are a couple grants that most local jurisdictions or most operational areas in the state get from the federal government, and we've tried to carve off a little bit of that money. I'd like to make it more to support our long-term recovery group and our VOAD, because we know that it takes time, it takes energy, and that organizational structure, that leader that is herding the cats that are in this room, needs to be compensated so that it's a viable, vibrant organization, and it just can't live on volunteer energy alone. And it can't, generally, it's challenging for local government to fund it fully, but we're trying to find ways and creative ways to continue to funnel some money for that sustaining operational baseline. And then another thing that we did locally in starting up our VOAD was we partnered with our city of Santa Cruz and city of Watsonville in the county, and we hired a consultant to help us with some of that high-level lane development, like what lane, what role, what's the one sheet for each organization, and try and identify who can play what role, because I think as you're starting a VOAD, for those of you who are starting or you're expanding a VOAD, that one sheet is critical, as Zach described, and really trying to get people into the lanes and so they feel comfortable doing the work that they're going to do if we ask them to do it. So that consultant that we hired helps kind of talk through with some of our different CBO and GO groups and identify what lane they were in, and then they kind of gave us hopefully a roadmap that we'll take to strengthening and building our VOAD. I want to open it up for questions in a little bit, but I want to touch on a couple other things in terms of our experiences in disaster and some of the lessons learned and some of the failings and things that we've done and are trying to relentlessly move forward in our imperfect process. So we've had 8 federally declared disasters in the last 7 years, not unlike many counties in Northern California. It's one after another. What we have seen in our most impactful one, aside from that pandemic thing that we discussed earlier, was our CZU Lightning Complex fire in 2020. It's the largest wildfire in our history in the county. For those that don't know, Santa Cruz County is the second smallest county by geographic region in the state. We have about 270,000 residents. Half of those are unincorporated residents. So we serve a very disproportionately high population as the county versus many, many counties in the state have a high percentage of their population in incorporated cities. That fire, we lost, numbers depend on how you look at it, but about 1,000 homes. And through that process, and I want to highlight, the reason I'm saying this is I want to highlight something that Zach said. Through that fire, it got a lot of notoriety. Redwood forests were thought to be unburnable from a mega fire standpoint. And, I think ours is one of the larger predominantly redwood forest wildfires in the state's history. A lot of our fires burn in other forested canopies. We were able to bring in, and by we, I mean our community foundation, millions of dollars to support immediate recovery, but also long-term recovery. And one of the things that I cannot take credit for, so I'm conveying this knowledge from our long-term recovery group and from our community foundation, and the learnings that they took from talking with places like Sonoma and others, is that the arc of recovery, depending on the disaster, can take a long, long time. And so there's a tendency to burn through a lot of that, no pun intended, to spend a lot of that money up front, because there are a lot of upfront costs and needs for people: clothing, shelter, basic necessities. What our long-term recovery group worked really hard, and I'll give Tonje credit for this, is we've tried to dole that money out judiciously over the arc. It's now 4+ years since that fire, and we're still in the recovery phase for many people. And so when you do collect those monies think about the arc of recovery, depending on the nature of the disaster. Flooding has a much shorter, generally, arc of recovery, whereas fire has a much longer one because you're starting from scratch for many of those folks. So we worked really hard in supporting our long-term recovery group in getting that money out and supporting folks in the long haul that is rebuilding your home and getting back through your front door. County government does not, especially Santa Cruz County government, doesn't often make rebuilding easy. In California, it's very challenging to rebuild. There's lots of steps. It's technically complex. Santa Cruz probably is one of the most technically complex places to rebuild in California, and many of our survivors have struggled because of that. And so it's important to support them through the whole arc. The other thing I wanted to share is we had 2 federally declared disasters, like many folks in this room, in 2023. The January storm sequence and the March storm sequence. And March was most notably known for our neighbors in Monterey and our community members in Pajaro that were flooded when the levee along the Pajaro River failed. One of the things, and this gets to the question about individual assistance, one of the things that we advocated for and fought for with Val's support was keeping our disaster recovery centers, our DRCs, open as long as we could. And the VOAD, I want to say that one role of VOAD members is to remind their constituencies that are impacted by disaster to go in and register with FEMA. And the reason being, obviously, as Zach said, is there's the fiscal resources, but if you don't register inside that window, then you miss the opportunity. And our small county, second smallest geographically, the smallest geographically is San Francisco, so it's not really a fair comparison. Our small county had the highest individual assistance participation for each disaster individually in the entire state in 2023, individually and collectively. So if you looked at one of the disasters, the January or the March, we had the most IA participation in our county, and that is a testament to keeping the disaster recovery centers open. That's a testament to our CBOs and NGOs communicating to community members to register with FEMA to access those resources, because they are limited and they don't go far enough, and it is very, very difficult to get over the individual assistance hurdle and get the money in your door. It's a pet peeve of mine that FEMA issues what's called a denial letter, and that denial letter is really actually just a request for information. And what we need to do at the VOAD level, at the local government level, is to demystify some of that process and explain that when you get a denial letter from the government, that immediately takes probably half the people, and they're going to walk away. They're going to be like, well, I got denied. I don't know why, or I didn't read it, or I don't understand it. And we've got to work through with case managers. We've got to work through at the government level. We've got to work through at the VOAD level to demystify that process and keep people in and getting through those requests for information hurdles so they can get those limited FEMA dollars, and then hopefully they can also get SBA dollars. So we tried to keep those DRCs open as long as we could to get as many people in, but also so that when you got the denial letter, you could go in and talk to somebody in person instead of trying to do it over the phone or on the computer, which inherently has access and functional needs challenges if you've got to do it over the phone or on a computer. So we wanted to keep those open as long as we could so that people could come in and ask those questions in person. And FEMA, depending on the season, depending on the number of disasters around the country, wants to get out of there, I wouldn't say as soon as they can, but they want to get out of the community because they've got another disaster to go to. And so we really tried to fight, and Annie did this a lot, to keep them there as long as we can. So those are a couple examples of how we are working to improve and strengthen our relationship with our community partners, and then also just some of the disaster experience. And then I'm happy to answer questions.
Great. Thank you, Dave. While you get your questions ready, it's been a privilege for us, and I'm talking about HCRM, to work in Santa Cruz County. There's so many different things. One is, as we're a faith-based organization, we rallied the churches together on gosh, it might have been 3 years ago, and we got the churches ready to go out and clean up the community. We did the same thing in Monterey with the Salinas churches. And so those are two communities that really understand partnership. And I love your comment and continuity, making sure that we're able to not have a pause in between. We need to have that continuity that goes straight across. The other thing I really love about Santa Cruz is the LTRG meetings are on the beach. So, I get sunburned. So, it's a beautiful area, yeah. Questions? Basically, what his question is that how do the counties navigate from county to county? And so, Dave, we'll let you take that.
Yeah, it's a great example. So often jurisdictional boundaries don't define who and what people identify as their community. Our Pajaro residents that technically live in Monterey County identify themselves as Watsonville residents. Watsonville is a city inside the county of Santa Cruz. And I think one of the things to answer that question a little bit is that we at the government level, I have Dina, who spoke earlier, his cell phone. I have Kelsey, the director of emergency management in Monterey. So I have to have a better relationship, and we continue to build strong relationships with our operational area, that's the county boundary, our operational area partners that surround us. So that in Pajaro, as an example, for those that don't know, when the Pajaro levee flooded the town of Pajaro, those residents, Monterey County residents, were sheltered in a Santa Cruz County, in the Santa Cruz County fairgrounds. So that initial relationship was started because we have a relationship with the fairgrounds to be able to operate a shelter there. So we opened those doors for them. And then once we recognized the duration of that recovery and that sheltering operation, they took over operation of it. But we stood together with them in the first days until they could take over on their own. So I think it really comes to relationship at the jurisdictional level to support community members that may straddle different jurisdictional boundaries so that we can communicate. When that shelter was closing, we had some Santa Cruz County residents in that shelter that we weren't aware of. So that was an example to me that I need, if that situation, God forbid, repeats itself, I need to know who's in that shelter, because there may be somebody that's a resident of mine that we can then support. So it's really, again, the relationships are here at the CBO, NGO, government level, but it's also government to government.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Matt?
Yeah, this is a question for the table. It's kind of a follow-up about the difference between from county to county and the way that Cal OES talks with and encourages county OESs and VOAD work and the like. At United Way of Northern California, our 9-county territory, our region, we have 5 different VOADs, and some of those VOADs cross into multiple counties. So I'm the vice chair of the Butte Glen VOAD. Theresa is the vice chair of the Shasta-Tama VOAD. And then we have Trinity VOAD, we have the Plumas County VOAD, and we have the Siskiyou-Modoc VOAD. We're constantly coming up against the difference from county to county in the way that each county does their work in response to an emergency. And I'm just curious if the table could share a little bit about the way that they encourage the cross-jurisdiction work that you were just highlighting, but then also helping the counties understand about what the VOAD can do in support. Thank you.
I'll give, one example, and not to entirely speak for my Monterey County counterparts, I think we need to all be in the same room together. So one of the things that we're doing in the aftermath of the flooding last year in Pajaro is the levee is actually being rebuilt in Pajaro. It's a levee that probably became outdated in the 50s or 60s, and it took basically a major act of state and federal legislation to get us the money to rebuild it. As part of that, we're creating an emergency action plan, and as part of that emergency action plan, there's a communication piece and a response piece. And what we're trying to do in that effort is to have our CBOs or our VOAD members in the room with the 2 jurisdictions, the 2 operational areas, so that we can talk about how to collaborate better. But I will also say that there have been challenges where our organizations that operated predominantly inside our boundaries, extended their support into Monterey County. And because we didn't have a strong enough relationship with those partners as they leaned into that work in the other county, it created complications, right? So we, at the jurisdictional level, at the county OA to OA level, need to get together with our mutual partners that straddle both or serve both to make sure that lane development and that role development is clarified for each county if they're there, and then how to prioritize it, right? So I have a standby contract with an organization, and I can compensate them for the work that they may need to do in a disaster, and I need to make sure that Monterey County, as an example, has that same contract so that there isn't I'm going to get paid by Dave, but I'm not going to get paid by Kelsey, and that's not how we serve our community best, right? So we need to work together to strengthen our collaboration at the emergency management OA to OA level, for sure.
Great.
That was a really good response, and I just want to add, sometimes it's not just county to county, it's cities within counties and their jurisdiction, and then the county jurisdiction. They may have different impacts. Sometimes the city has a lot more, so that's critical, and I appreciate what you're saying. This is something we all need to look at from county to county, and some counties are so very, very different. Just the difference between Butte and Tehama for the park fire, because fires are just going to keep moving. I mean, it touched a lot of counties. So did the Dixie fire, and every county had their own way of doing things. What I appreciate was on the voluntary organization level, how, for example, Butte Glen VOAD, Shasta Tehama VOAD came together to form an LTR long-term recovery group.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. And is collaborating, working together, and also recognizing there's a massive impact here and a not so massive, and we need to find them. It's challenging, but they're working really hard among those two VOADs to make it a single, because it's one fire. It's one fire, not just this, we're only going to help this county. I think it's really great that the VOADs collaborated to form this long-term recovery group.
I mean, if I could I'll add one point just because I think I'm obligated to say, disasters begin and end locally, and that is, localism is determinative, as our governor would say. We have this fortunate position at Cal OES to try and sit at the 30,000 foot level and see all things and be all things. At the end of the day, we support our cities and our counties. But I will say that the nonprofits on the ground are great eyes and ears for us, because I sit, quite literally, the BOC has no windows. So I sit in a windowless room in Sacramento. So who am I to tell you what is going on in your community? But if you hear about things, if you experience those sort of issues, I'm working in this county, things don't seem to be jiving. It's not that you're telling on them, but let Cal OES know, and we'll see if we could casually, through our regional partner, say, hey, were you aware? And let me tell you, 9 times out of 10, they're going to go, I actually didn't know that. And we'll see what we can fix. I can't make all sorts of guarantees, but if I don't know about a problem, I can't fix it.
The other thing I'd add, just on the all disasters are local, is that the organizations that you work for or that are part of a long-term recovery group often define local differently. And I think that's an important definition that we as government need to recognize, is that even, as I said, the second smallest county in the state, what happens in our Summit area is very different than what happens down in our Watsonville area or on our North Coast. So local can be hyper-local, and an organization can serve a hyper-local group. And so we, as local government at the county level, need to recognize that local can even be much, much smaller than our county boundaries, and we need to lean into that too. So I know we're really short on time. I'll answer real briefly as a call to action for everybody in this room. So wireless emergency alerts, that's like when we send out something at the county level or the state level and it hits everybody's phone in a region. we can only do that in English and Spanish. We can only send NOAA weather radio messages, non-weather emergency messages in English. So our state and federal government and our technology, that now I have this smartphone that's smarter than me and it's got AI on it and all these things. We can do all these amazing things with technology, but we still can't send wireless emergency messages in more than 2 languages.
Why not?
Exactly. So it's one of those things that we need to work on at the state and federal level to motivate and put the money into the resources that can change that, so that either the cell phone provider automatically translates. If your phone is selected on a language, it automatically translates, and that should be some genius coder's side project, very easy to do. But right now, that's the reality, and so we need to advocate with our state and federal legislators to fix that, so that, you know, on one small level from a language standpoint, we get better communication to our community.
Yeah, great. Thank you very much for that. I want you to notice what we have here. This is our government partners. And the reason why I did not bring the Red Cross up to sit with the government partners is because I know the Red Cross feels the same way I do. I am so tired of people thinking that the Red Cross is government. They are not government. They are one of us. They're VOAD. They're a very essential piece of what we do. So I want to introduce you to Jim Mollerus, and Jim is going to talk about mass care. But I want you to notice one thing. When we're in the response phase of a disaster, this is our core. These are the ones that we respond to. And when we get into government-led, it starts with Dave, then it goes to Cal OES, but begins with us. But guess who responds immediately after the disaster? Mass care. Jim?
Yeah, Jim Mollerus. I have been a volunteer at the American Red Cross Silicon Valley chapter for about 11 years now. I am not Ginny Ortiz. Ginny wasn't feeling well, so she asked me to step in and present this to you today. And I really appreciate that request of her, because I love talking about the Red Cross and Red Cross mission and how we go about doing our business. Back of the room. There we go. So I'm going to talk about 3 things today. Mass care and our mass care services, and how important it is for us with the partnerships that we have with our VOADs as well as our government partners. And then we'll bring it in real terms at the end with a case study, something that really happened here in Santa Clara County not long ago. All right, the American Red Cross, let's get you grounded in what we are. We're not a government organization. However, we are chartered by the federal government to be the primary humanitarian disaster relief organization that helps out in national disasters and local disasters. You probably have all seen us on the 6 o'clock news. Hurricanes, wildfires, the Red Cross has a big presence. If you're a Red Cross volunteer in the room, you're probably inspired by some of those disasters like I was to get involved with the Red Cross. But we are chartered by the federal government. We rely on our volunteers and some staff, and we're funded by donations to the American public. So we are not funded by the federal government. We're not funded by state governments. We are an independent organization. 65,000 disasters we respond to every year. That's a big number. Thank goodness they're not 65,000 Hurricane Miltons. Most of these are home fires. The large majority of these are home fires. Here in Santa Clara County alone, we respond to about 125 home fires every year. Fire departments, they do a great job of protecting life and property, but they don't help people out after the disaster. They call the Red Cross to come in and help out. We're 95% volunteers on our big disaster relief operations. 95% volunteers. So I wear a big button that says I'm a volunteer on a disaster, but know that we're not government, and we're not paid people. We are volunteers that are there to help because we want to help and serve. We have over 120 national partnerships. Some of them are represented here in the room today: Catholic Charities, Goodwill, the Southern Baptist, just a few. We have dozens and dozens of local partnerships as well that aren't included in that 120. All right, phases of the disaster. This is, we've all seen these three things: readiness, response, and recovery post-disaster. Mass care is the focus is on the response phase. Being the sheltering coordinator for the Silicon Valley chapter, I can tell you we're actually pretty involved in the readiness phase as well. We're very active on the readiness phase. But today we'll dive in a little bit deeper on that response element of what we do with Red Cross. 4 things we do in mass care with the Red Cross. The thing that we're known for, sheltering. We also are very involved with feeding people. You want to have a happy shelter, you better feed people. We also do distribution of emergency supplies. There are other organizations that do this as well. These are, taking the clean-out kits to the local communities. And we also have a reunification effort as well. We'll talk about each of these 4 elements right now. Sheltering. Red Cross sheltering is, it's basic. We're meeting the basic needs of people. Who's been in a shelter? Who's been into a shelter, right? They are adequate for keeping people safe, for getting them the resources they need to start their recovery path. It's not comfortable though. It's basic stuff. But we need to make sure that it's accessible by everybody. Accessible in that we can get to the site, we can get our clients to the site, and once they're there, they have all their accessibility needs met. That means that they can get around the shelter. If they have a second language that they use, that they can get all the communications that we have in whatever their language is. Suchi, thank you, Suchi, once again for hosting us, but thank you again for being such a good partner for us, because 2017 floods, half of our, let's get up to Suchi, half of our clients were displaced Vietnamese. And so they came down and they were in our shelter for providing translation services. All of our signage was done up in Vietnamese, and they were there to help us with the translation needs of those clients. We have 2 types of shelters that we run. The thing you see on the 6 o'clock news nowadays is congregate shelters. That's that high school gym that's now been converted into a living space for people that are displaced. Back in the pandemic days, 2020, 2021, we were doing primarily non-congregate shelters. That is hotel-based shelters. And we'll still do hotel-based shelters, but it has to be approved for and funded by a local jurisdiction, county or city. So congregate shelters is what we really focus on nowadays. Now, one thing that we do have a focus on is getting people out of shelters. Once again, they're adequate, but they're not a long-term recovery element for people. It gets them onto the recovery. It's a bridge for them. So in our shelters, hopefully we have FEMA TSA on larger events that's queued up quickly. What's a TSA stand? Oh, TSA, transitional, yeah. What does TSA stand for?
Transitional shelter assistance, temporary shelter assistance.
All right. And we have some financial assistance that the Red Cross can provide, but we also have community partners we bring in to help out as well. I'm the sheltering coordinator. I love closing shelters more than I like opening them, believe me. All right, feeding. We do a couple different kinds of feeding. We do mobile feeding. This is where we'll take the food to the communities and to the people out in the field. If you've seen the Red Cross trucks driving around in the disaster area, may be that they are some of our mobile feeding units. There can also be feeding centers. We can utilize our existing shelter sites oftentimes. Oftentimes, especially the more rural, the disaster area, and some of our folks that are in some of the more rural counties know this, that you get bigger populations that want to stay outside the shelter than they want to stay inside. And dormitory is just a service we offer at a shelter. At a shelter site, you can get access to everything that we offer at a shelter: health services, mental health services, casework, and feeding. We can also set up kitchens. We usually bring a partner in. The Red Cross, we do a lot of things really well. One thing we don't do very well is cook. So that's where we bring in folks like Salvation Army and World Central Kitchen to help with our feeding mission. We also try to do our best to meet the dietary needs of our clientele. Spiritual, health, religious needs can vary differently within the client population in the shelter. We try to meet all of those needs the best we can. Distribution of emergency supplies on larger disasters where there's a need for this. We'll bring in our DES group. Got that? DES? Distribution of emergency supplies.
I might mention that on the back of your programs, there is a list of acronyms. So we have Acronym Central on the back of each of your programs.
Yeah, so we will bring those supplies to Central Points of Distribution, CPODs. We'll also do mobile distribution. Those same trucks that may be doing feeding one day may be repurposed the next day to do DES drops. And these will be, things like cleaning products, the muck out kits, hygiene kits, blankets, clean water, PPE, those kinds of things. And it could look different depending on what's happening with the disaster. Here in Northern California, we're subject to wildfire. And so with the approval of county health, sometimes we will include sifting kits so people can sift through the ashes to find, things, tokens and whatnot, belongings from their destroyed homes. But we make sure we have the approval of the county health before we provide that. Reunification is the last of our 4 mass care services we provide. And this is where we want to get people reconnected to lost loved ones. And it's hard for people to think about their own recovery needs if they're too worried about getting reconnected with their loved one. We have, it's primarily digital nowadays. You can go and call 1-800-RED Cross and create a case. You can go to theredcross.org and get connected as well. And we work with partners to resolve this. We work closely with the local government agencies, the cities and counties, and plus some of our VOAD partners. So components of mass care delivery: people, stuff, and partners. All right, so people. We have a lot of trained volunteers. In Santa Clara County, we have about 100 trained sheltering volunteers. We also have health services folks. We have mental health services. One thing I do say is disasters bring out the best in people. And so whenever we're responding to a disaster, we're not doing it in just this Red Cross vacuum. We have all sorts of people from the local communities who usually come out and want to get involved. And we'll find ways to get those local volunteers involved. We call them event-based volunteers. and they can be a great addition to our team. We've also bring in CERT members as well to help in our local shelters here in Santa Clara County. So, yay to CERT. Stuff. This is, by the way, this is about the most oversimplified chart. Cots, toiletries, buildings. The list is massive in terms of what we really need to run a shelter. And partners, we need partners for information. That's where we really need the help of the local jurisdictions and our emergency responding groups. CAL FIRE is a great partner in terms of their public information officers. And community connections. Our VOAD here in Santa Clara County is Cadre, and so we need their help as well. We'll see how that actually came through in the case study in a few minutes. All right, so sheltering. Working with partners. We don't own any of our shelter sites. We have 185 shelters alone, pre-identified, and that we've inspected, 185 in Santa Clara County. Every county throughout the country has Red Cross shelters. And their local teams are the ones who work to identify who those partners are. And that way we have a nice big roster. Some are as small as 25 people that they can support. Some are over 500. So we want a big roster of sites because we want to match the shelter to the size of the displaced population. Partners, accessibility. Red Cross doesn't do a lot of transportation. We look to partners to help us with the transportation needs of our clients. Interpreters, I've already mentioned Suchi, thank you again. But we bring in interpreters into our shelters. And a lot of things on health and dignity as well. So usually a lot of these things like showers and laundry, we'll work with our government partners to get those fulfilled at our shelter sites if we don't have those amenities on site. And we'll also work with different organizations for replacement of durable medical equipment. Medical equipment, glasses, those are a big need if you've lost those, any medications, clothing, those kinds of things. Feeding and distribution of emergency supplies. Once again, we have partners. I mentioned the Salvation Army, World Central Kitchen, and those are the ones who help us with preparing our meals for our clients. And we also have, we want to tap into the local community to help us better understand how we can meet the needs of our clients. I'll use that example of the 2017, the floods, and how we can better serve the Vietnamese community. It wound up being a real win, I think, on all sides for how we were able to change and pivot how we were supporting those clients independently to how much better we did it once we got more people involved, more groups involved. Reunification, it's primarily a lot of coordination with the law enforcement and the local government Office of Emergency Management. And with unaccompanied minors and separated child inquiries, we use the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children. So. All right, so we've heard about communication and coordination. It's so important for us to be really on top of this. I can't tell you how many times I've been a shelter manager or headquarters shelter manager where I'm in charge of all the shelters on a disaster, and I hear about, we've got Salvation Army is delivering dinner at 6 o'clock, and some local group has just shown up to deliver dinner at 5:45. It's a waste. We've got too much food, not connected, so we need to make sure we know who to talk to, how you talk to it. We have a chain of command that we follow within the Red Cross. So we have specific paths of communication. And it's really important as we work together on these really complex disasters that we're really buttoned down on how we're coordinating and communicating. I have a saying, and you probably have heard it, of, go slow to move fast. Don't jump into something without being sure you know who to talk to first. All right, we're bringing home with our case study here. Atmospheric rivers, we've heard about this in a couple of other jurisdictions already. We had it activated here in Santa Clara County, January 2023. Red Cross was activated by the San Jose City, and we worked with them to identify a shelter site. And that was the Seven Trees Community Center. A week into this, we opened up a second one at Camden Community Center. The city was able to tell us the demographics of the displaced population. It's 100% pre-disaster homes, so got us ready for that. We were able to get our trained workers at our shelters. Like I said, we brought the CERT members in to augment our team at one point. One thing that we identified was a need for interpreters. So this is where Cadre came in. Asked Marcia to help us out here. And she was able to get us, through Catholic Charities, some interpreters. Half of our population was Spanish speaking. Another critical need that we identified was clothing. Atmospheric rivers, pre-disaster homeless. Not anybody came in dry. Everybody came in wet. So they were able to help us get vouchers with the goodwill to help get clothes, clean and dry clothes for those people. Zion Ministries helped us with our sorting clothes. We had a lot of clothes that were donated at the shelter sites, so they helped us sort through that so we can figure out which stuff could go directly to the clients and which we needed to have processed and laundered. There are some partners on here that aren't listed, and I'll call out some of our government partners. The Parks and Recreation group for City of San Jose, we ran a pet shelter, and it wasn't Red Cross folks that were running that. It was the City of San Jose. So I know I'm missing a few, but I'm getting the cue to wrap it up. So I think I'll end it here.
Just sit tight just for a moment, Jim. I'm going to take a liberty. I think I can do that because I am the chair, right? Yeah. Okay. The reason why I wanted you all to stay here for after Jim is, Dave, let's start with you. Tell me, we know that you activate and the importance. Can you tell us what the Red Cross means? And I also want to point out the Salvation Army is equal to what the Red Cross does. They may be a little bit smaller on the comparison, but we have a wonderful chapter of Salvation Army here as well. So Dave, tell us a little bit about how the relationship between the two of you work.
Yeah, I'll highlight the staffing part of that oversimplified model to start with, right? So as a small county, a small governmental organization, we struggle with shelter staffing. And so we try to train some of our county employees to be shelter managers or shelter support staff, but we lean on our relationship and the strength of our relationship with Red Cross to help us and either lead that or help train the folks, especially if it's a long-term sheltering mission, because we struggle to have those people doing that work day in and day out at the, if they're government employees. That's one way which we work together with Red Cross.
Awesome, thank you. And Zach or Valerie, where does the state get involved when it comes to working with the Red Cross?
For Cal OES as opposed to California Department of Social Services back there. So we would primarily at the local assistance center level. We are, and you usually already are partnered with the county. So the first thing they say is, "Oh, we've already been in touch. They're coming." But during those atmospheric rivers last year, I had multiple contacts with Red Cross because the volunteers would come in and come out, and because we were learning of all those language needs, you guys were able to really help however you did through your local partners in all of those darn counties, help meet those needs with mental health, crisis counselors. There were other pieces, but we couldn't have done it, and I kept having a statewide partner. There were just so many. We had multiple ones going on at once. So we had so many needs that I was able just to touch the Red Cross with and ask if they didn't already call me first. And what are your needs for this one? How can we help?
Yeah. Thank you, Valerie. Zach, anything you want to add to that?
No, as Valerie mentioned, the California Department of Social Services is the state mass care lead. We've got our friends in the back. You can tell because they have the best swag of all state agencies. If you would mind standing up and showing off the jackets, yeah.
Yes.
Big fan. There we go. If you state service, civil service, it's you get some perks every once in a while. Low pay, good swag. But I want to foot stomp that there's a number of, I think when we think of Red Cross, we think of sheltering heads in beds. But in reality, as mentioned, there's this huge Red Cross apparatus that comes with that. So even if there isn't a mass care and shelter operation, making sure to tap into all those other Red Cross services is important to us.
Thank you. Jim, I want to thank you very much for your presentation, and I want to say this to you in the nicest way possible, but you got to put $1 in the pot. I saw that. How many PPE? Yeah, you failed to mention what PPE is. I paid your $1. You're okay. But thank you all so much. This has been a great session.
Social Services, and they gave me just a couple minutes to tell you a little bit about disaster case management. We do have quite a few disaster case management providers in the room. Everybody raise your hands. Yay, we couldn't do the work without them. But my purpose is not to give you an overview of what disaster case management is. It's to tell you about how we want to identify new providers, because we never know when the next disaster is going to happen. Basically, what is DCMP? It's a disaster case management program that comes into play when we get a presidentially declared disaster and individual assistance is granted by FEMA. At that time, the Department of Social Services, which is one of the, this is our emergency function, besides mass care and shelter, my other people from the same branch, disaster case management can be applied for the federal government. And we have to locate providers, nonprofit organizations throughout the state that can help us deliver disaster case management services. So as you know, we have 58 counties. Well, I don't have providers in every county. And that's what my goal here is, just to briefly tell you about it. If your organization or sister organizations would like to be involved, I'll give you the contact information. Basically, we're a supplemental program. The state provides some of the funding for our state staff, and then we contract for the last 9 disasters with a management agency, which has been Catholic Charities of California, and then they contract with providers in the local areas. Now, in past fires, we had a lot of already established providers that were willing to step up. But for our atmospheric rivers, we got hit with a bunch of counties who had never done this before. And so we saw the need that we need to identify providers in the area that are willing to contract with us to help give services to the organization, not to the survivors in their areas, to deal with their language needs, to be part of the community. So this is what I wanted to talk to you about. There we go. Point this way. So what I put out is a notice of interest, and this is to just identify nonprofit organizations that want to be a part of our organization when a disaster happens. We have no funding for it now. It's not going under a contract. It's just establishing a list of possible providers that are willing to do disaster case management. If a disaster hits any county within the state, we have to find ones in that county to help, because people from the community are best to serve. So right up here it says notice of interest. If you're interested in finding out more, please just email us at dcmp@dss.ca.gov and I can send you the notice of interest. And all I'm asking is for organizations, are you willing to be a part of our response if it happens? Because as we know, this in the Bay Area, we can have earthquakes at any time. So thank you very much, and thank you for letting squeeze
Thank you. Appreciate that.
All right, so we're going to get started. This is our session 3 on recovery. We're going to be talking about different facets of long-term recovery. It is a complicated subject, and it is not something that most of us willingly want to know how to do. I think that's a fair statement. It's something you have to do to help your community return to normal. So introducing myself again, my name is Valerie Brown, Deputy ED of United Policyholders. I am the current chair of the Santa Cruz County 2020 CZU Fire Long-Term Recovery Group. I just got a board installed for the San Diego January 2024 flooding, and I'm also a board member of the disaster leadership team that focuses nationwide on mentoring groups in long-term recovery. Which is all to say, I know a little bit about long-term recovery, and I will not pretend to know it all. But it makes me very willing to be the person facilitating today's conversation. So we are going to start with our first panelists. And panelists, they will be sitting down later, but for now they're going to be at the podium. We have Tonje Switzer, the Executive Director of the Santa Cruz County Long-Term Recovery Group. And I will be your Vanna, and I will click your slides.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for being here, and I feel honored to speak to you. I'm certainly not a veteran in this field like so many others that have spoken before today. My name is Tonje Switzer. I am the Executive Director of the Long-Term Recovery Group of Santa Cruz County. I came into this work through both working in nonprofit social services in Santa Cruz County with community bridges, and also being personally impacted by the CCU fire where my family lost their home. So it was sort of a natural step for me to already working with these communities and working with one of the organizations that ended up being disaster case management, to then working in the field as well. I was not part of the long-term recovery group initially because I was concerned with my own recovery. But I did work with the standing up of the disaster case management program at Community Bridges, and ended up being sort of looped into the long-term recovery group about a year into the recovery process. I wanted to talk a little bit about the cycle of disaster, which many of you are familiar with. So we do have sort of a warning and anticipation period. There's sort of a space missing there that a lot of you have talked about, which is the preparedness and mitigation part that comes in the blue sky period. So it happens throughout the cycle, but really, we're doing it now. We're in long-term recovery group, but we're also preparing for the future disasters. And then we have the warning and the anticipation. We know there's a red flag warning, right? It's going to be hot, it's going to be dry, it's going to be windy, or there's going to be, a lot of rainfall, wind. And so we're anticipating, we're making sure that we have all the alerts set up on our phones. And then when we have an impact from disaster, we go into evacuations. Emergency response teams are evacuated, and there are sometimes search and rescue operations included. After the aftermath of the disaster includes damage assessment, needs assessment, and initial recovery efforts. And then we have relief and remedy with immediate aid and assistance, provisions of basic necessities such as food, water, and shelter, medical care, and psychological support. We also have short-term recovery, which has to do with providing intermediate housing. And then the long-term recovery is rebuilding infrastructure, rebuilding homes, and working on hazard mitigation and future preparedness. Next slide, please. There is a cycle to the responses. We have the immediate response is the initial response with search and rescue, providing immediate needs for immediate needs. The insurance and personal resources, so helping families accessing their insurance information, understanding their policies, helping them access any funding they may have. They may have left their homes without any, without their wallets, without their phones. And also providing emergency funds, which often takes the form of, $500 Visa cards or gift cards, things like that. FEMA then comes in with immediate reliefs, which is often $500 to $1,000 right away, and again, offering counseling services and things like that. We've already talked about SBA, which is Small Business Administration. I want to save my dollars for... Okay, thank you. You're prepared. And then comes the FEMA programs with recovery support. I want to mention something which you may not be aware of. I actually talked to somebody today that was not aware of it. There is actually federal funding right now. It's called Recover California. It's coming through the state housing and community development. It's up to $500,000 to rebuild homes for families that were impacted by 9 counties that were impacted by catastrophic wildfire events in 2020. So Santa Cruz County is one of those. So we're not only trying to help families recover through our programs, but we're also connecting them with the state program, because recovery is not linear. It's not going to look the same for everybody. And so we want to make sure that we know about all the resources available and we can point people to them and help them apply for and move through that approval process for the programs that fit best for their situation. And then for the long-term support, the long-term recovery, we have it's a collaborative effort, right? And so we talk about the VOADs. The long-term recovery group is sort of a mini VOAD in a way. It is connecting government and local organizations and community groups with, helping connect all of those together so that we can connect impacted households with the resources available. On the next slide, it's interesting to me what this looks like, because this is really like a VOAD. This is what a VOAD structure looks like. In a VOAD structure, you would have one of those balls outside of the steering committee or the board. You would have a circle that is called long-term recovery group. So when you then have a disaster, that ball sort of pops out and becomes its own entity, and that is what a long-term recovery group is. It has the majority of the other functions that a VOAD would have. So you have, donations management, you have volunteer coordination, you have, for the NorCal VOAD, we have construction committee, communication, community assessments, all of those things are really important. And then I added some on the slide there as well. I ran out of space for my bubbles, honestly. But spiritual and emotional care is extremely important. So connecting with your church communities, making sure there's counselors available to talk to people about, the crisis that they're experiencing. Advocacy, and I'm looking at Dave Reid when I say that, because there's a lot of advocacy conversations that's going back and forth, and that's very much connected to the community assessment committee, or sort of the being connected to the community, understanding what are the needs of the community, and how can we effectively communicate that back to government or other entities that can support us in making changes, changing policies, maybe directing funding where it needs to go, so that we can be more effective in the work that we do. Housing support and unmet needs roundtable. Unmet needs roundtable is where the funding comes in, and where the disaster case managers, and I'm looking at several of them that are part of our long-term recovery group effort, that will apply for that funding, right? Will help impacted community members apply for that funding to support their recovery. Best practices for long-term recovery group, and you can just stay on that slide, I think, for now. So some of the best practices is the organizational structure of a long-term recovery group. You want to have establish strong, experienced leadership to guide the long-term recovery group. In Santa Cruz County, we were extremely fortunate to have Valerie Brown come in as a contracted partner through United Policyholders and help start up our long-term recovery group. We did not have a VOAD, we did not have a long-term recovery group, and so without that outside support to create that structure and literally tell us how do we do this, right? We had 911 homes burned down. How do we start? And so that's really really important. And Valerie was instrumental in explaining to us and training us on how to set it up. It's important to implement a robust communication system to keep all stakeholders informed. In the beginning, same with the VOAD, with when a disaster hits, you want to have very frequent meetings. So same with the long-term recovery group, you'll meet frequently. You'll make sure that all the stakeholders, everybody involved, have the information that they need to be effective, and that information also goes out into the community. So you can see I added sort of arrows in both directions as part of my bubbles, because there's always going to be information coming in that needs to come into each of those categories, and then that then is discussed in meetings with steering committee, and then gets translated and sent out to other committees that is then tasked with actually doing something about it. So, for example, if there is, there's volunteer coordination happening, right? But we need to have volunteers. That would be the communication committee, for example, that could send out then communication to the communities to make sure that we have the volunteers that we need to do specific tasks. Case management, and I know we have a great speaker next who's going to talk about case management, so I'll touch upon it very briefly. Just a few things I want to touch on is the assessment. The more thorough you can do that, make that assessment as you meet the clients the first time, the less times you have to ask the same questions. And for anyone who's been through a disaster, who's talking to FEMA, is talking to SBA, is talking Small Business Administration, is then talking to somebody doing damage assessment, is talking to the disaster intake center, and then is talking to disaster case manager. Honestly, they've told their stories so many times, and it's exhausting. It's painful, right? And so we want to avoid that as much as possible. And that's somewhere also that long-term recovery groups can come in, especially if you're set up ahead of time to create sort of a unified model that we all use. So if you're going door to door out into the community, talking to constituents that have been impacted, you want to have a central way of collecting that information that is then shared across the organizations that are part of the recovery effort. Community engagement. Involve community members in your group. So in our board has, well, I'm not on the board, I'm not the executive director, I was personally impacted. We had 2 other board members that were personally impacted. So that's 2 out of 6. So a pretty high, it's a pretty high percentage there. We have disaster case management on our board. So you want to make sure that you have the voices on those committees, on the board that actually knows what's going on the ground. We don't want to create helicopter models where we come in and say, we know how to fix this, right? You want to ask, what is it that is happening in your community, and how can we support you, and then see how we can connect everybody in our community, in our recovery process, that have resources that can meet that need. I'm trying to rush through a little bit because I know there's a lot of other speakers here. So financial management, you want to make sure that you have a way of collecting that funding. Again, community foundations, huge plug for that. We've been so fortunate to have a strong community foundation in Santa Cruz County, and also church community, Valley Churches United. So those are sort of our two organizations in Santa Cruz County who's done donation management, have funneled funding to them, and are still, after 4 years after the CCU fire, are still have funding available and are still funding cases up to $50,000 for recovery efforts. Let's see. Okay, next slide, please. So I'm a little annoyed by this model. I think it's great in many ways, but the reason I'm a little annoyed with it is because it says up to 1 year, and then it's like after anniversary, and then it stops. Right? We're not 4 years after the CCU fire, and this repeats itself often. It is it shows the emotional toll of a disaster, but it doesn't end there. It keeps going, and especially 4 years later, we have hundreds of homes that haven't been rebuilt yet. And so it's just something for us to keep in mind as we work with families, we work in long-term recovery groups, or in other ways are working with families impacted, that we're in for the long haul. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. And, it's okay to take breaks and say, I need to step back from this for a little bit because I've put myself in it so much that I need to take care of myself. It's very, very important. But we do need to know that it's a long haul. We're in it, until it's done, so to speak. Let's see. So straddling both, so you can go to the next slide, please. So straddling both sides of the fence when it comes to disaster recovery, because I work in disaster recovery and I'm also impacted by the disaster. I understand how important it is to be connected to the challenges that our community members face, right? And so by building strong relationships with our community, with our impacted community, we're better able to advocate for them, we're better able to understand what their needs are. And let's see, we can also empower our community members to rebuild their lives and, be sort of an active part of that recovery process. This is Santa Cruz. I forgot the slide. So this is what happened. So we had two disasters. We had the 2020 fires. We lost 911 homes across around 680 properties, more or less. And as of last week, we had 122 complete rebuilds, final occupancy permits. So you can see there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. So upwards of 200 properties have been sold so far. So some decided not to rebuild. We have quite a few, over 100 that are, it's called CNC, conditionally not cleared. It means that they have difficulty clearing the path for actually being allowed to rebuild. We have multiple difficulties in Santa Cruz. We have geological issues. We have environmental health with septic systems. We live on a fault line. We also have entire communities that are not able to rebuild because CAL FIRE will not sign off on their roads. So there's sort of multiple challenges. You can go to the next slide. Probably just click through 2 slides. You can go to the next one too. So one of the things that we learned when the atmospheric rivers happened in 2023 is that disasters look very different depending on the type of disaster. So we thought we knew disaster after a wildfire, and then we had an atmospheric river, and the response, the needed response was immediate, right? And so with a wildfire, after it burns, we have to wait for debris removal. It can take months. Our home burned down in August, and we were not cleared to do anything on our property really until March the next year. So that's how long it can take to clear a property after a wildfire. Whereas with the flooding in the atmospheric rivers, it was imperative to get out there immediately and start doing, mediation work, mucking guts, and avoid, future mold programs. So at that point, I think one of the biggest challenges that we faced was warehouse space and having room to house volunteers to come and help with the work. What else? I'm gonna run out of time, so I'm gonna be. Let's see. I think just to leave you with something. Every community is different. We have the North County fires was up in the mountains. I sometimes say we have two hard-to-reach communities in Santa Cruz County. We have the mountain community, which are insular in many ways. Many do not want to apply for resources. It's a little bit of a, I can do this on my own sentiments. And then you have our South County community, where we have a much larger Latinx population who are sometimes fearful of going to centers and applying for resources that they qualify for, that they are eligible for. So I want to close with the importance of long-term recovery groups to understand the communities that they work with, tailor their response accordingly, to make sure that they are able to, effectively reach people and share information about the resources available. Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to throw some more money on the table. So when you have a FEMA IA declaration, you need to, when you're standing up that long-term recovery group or when your VOAD is going, you need a multi-agency ROI. I'm not going to define the terms yet, so put my money on the table. And that the reason you do that is if you have that, regardless of whether you have the FEMA IA, individual assistance, or you don't, and you when you get to case management, whether it is DCMP, and I'll let James explain that. That's why my third dollar is going on the table. Or you're handling it yourselves with the resources you have, volunteer or paid. You need to know who those people are that were impacted, and so that's one of the takeaways when you're standing up that long-term recovery group. You need to have that piece. If you don't have that piece, it is important you get it. You are welcome to come to the LTRG. I'll throw another dollar in, Kevin, sorry. Group, we meet monthly. I don't remember what Friday, but I know we meet on Fridays. And I'd like to introduce James, and he can define that word I did not define. Yes. James Coble with Catholic Charities of California.
Before I actually start, I want to recognize some of our program providers who actually do DCMP work. Well, there's my first dollar right there. So we have East Bay, we have San Francisco, we have Santa Cruz, Monterey, we have Santa Clara. And Valerie, if you could change hats for just 1 second, we have San Diego. I know it's been a long day, so if you need to stand up during my presentation and stretch a little bit, you're more than welcome to. No offense up here. So I had this wonderful, fantastic presentation, of which 90% was covered today. So what I think I'm going to do is talk about the nuances of DCMP work. Valerie hit me with some questions, so I'm going to kind of cover some of those things as well. The first thing I want to say is what vision Kevin and Adriana and your group has. Education is the fifth component of those 4 C's, although it's not a C word, right? But education is so important to understand the roles that each one of us take within this whole process. And I want you to know that DCMP work, I told you, Zach, that stop to the ATM was working. So it's evolving. Annie and I were talking about the fires back in 2020, and one more thing. FEMA FIDO report. When we started, so I was a program manager for the Creek Fire in Fresno County and the SQF fire in Tulare County. Our report, our damage assessment report included a name, a phone number, maybe or maybe not an email address. So FEMA and California Department of Social Services, who we contract with as the management agency, ask for more information. So as of the last two declarations, not only did we get a name and a phone number, contact information, we have actual damage assessments done by FEMA, so we know the numerical value of that. We know what FEMA paid them. And I'm going to talk about some of our positions within DCMP work, so it's late in the day, you guys, I'm sorry. You're going to get rich, Zach. We're going to fund the next disaster through my mistakes here. But having this information gives our case managers the ability to triage, which is very important. There is only so much money that we can distribute, right? And it is these VOADs and long-term recovery groups, I didn't say LTRG. It's these long-term recovery groups that actually provide a lot of the financial or resources that we don't have. So let me clarify something about IA, individual assistance.
Oh, wait, you find it.
Thank you. So most people think when they hear an award, you know, for example, let's just say East Bay, you were awarded $3 million in your county. So she's probably thinking, gosh, I have $3 million, where are you going to make an impact? The funds are restricted. So those restricted funds are, it will pay for fringe benefits, salaries, it will pay for office space. And there's some language, and I hope Renee Jackson's left because I don't remember the proper language. But it's very important. We don't call it materials or supplies. There's language that FEMA is very much aware, CDS is very much aware, but we can work around as a line item to get those things done. But it's very restrictive. So there's another bucket of money that goes directly to the survivors. And I know that Kevin talked earlier about duplication of services. And I know initially there are a lot of good-hearted people doing a lot of great work, and I want to preface this, it needs to be done at the time of the disaster. And I'll talk about timelines in just a second. Has to be done, but we don't want to duplicate anything because those poor folks may have to pay FEMA back any funds that were given. So to be able to vet is one of the main things that our disaster case managers do. They will vet, they'll see what was distributed, and we itemize that. So when FEMA says, when we're doing an appeals letter, and I'll talk about appeals in just 1 second, where did that money go? We can itemize it, we can do it, so there's no duplication of services. So let me talk about the timeline for just 1 second. Back in the 2020 wildfires, I didn't get a FEMA filings for 8 months. We didn't know who we had to contact, so we relied on United Way, the Red Cross, church organizations, and whoever was doing that work initially to get us started. And so when I say to get us started, I want you to know there's only been one, change your hat again. San Diego County had the funds to start off on day one. Everybody else is waiting to be funded through FEMA. So we've learned a lot during this process because FEMA generally doesn't get your providers the money funded for 6 months. So people have to operate for 6 months without FEMA reimbursement. It actually goes through CDSS. California Department of Social Services. I'm going to get this right, guys.
Just give her your wallet.
Thank you. Thank you. The PIN number is... And I lost my train of thought, but kind of going back to the process.
California Department of Social Services.
That didn't help me. Thank you. Bless you.
Funding of the disaster case manager.
Thanks, Annie. So it takes care of funding of case managers. Typically what happens is when FEMA does a damage assessment, it's undervalued. We know with the fires, pretty easy to assess damage, right? There's a foundation, no walls, everything's just burnt. With our floods, you may not even know that a house is damaged. You may not even see water marks on the side of the house, although the water level might have been 5-6 feet deep. Not until you go inside the house. So when you go inside the house, you'll see electrical issues, you'll see mold, you'll see just a number of different things. And I think Zach, you said the new dollar cap is $43,000. Well, for some of our floods, it was $41,000. So can you imagine owning a home where you had a mudslide, pushed it off its foundation, and the most you could hope for is $41,000? Just doesn't cut it. Some of our rural areas that need the barriers from the house. Help me out, Kevin. What are those called? Thank you. See, you guys are experts already. I don't know what I'm doing. That can cost $200,000. We've seen $200,000 walls that need to be replaced. And the $41,000, since it's not the home, it doesn't cover that. It'll only cover the structure. And of course, you have to own the home to get that reimbursed, right? So what our folks have done, so that just the 5 programs that I talked about did appeal letters to FEMA, and those survivors were awarded over $500,000 in excess of what they paid on initially. Can you imagine that? So raise your hand, providers. Just amazing work. And to navigate the FEMA process, I think I heard somebody say, if you check the wrong box on the application process, it goes into Never Never Land. You'll never hear it. And I really appreciate the gentleman who said that it's not really a denial, it's we need more information. I wish we could communicate that a little bit better. So one of the lessons that we've learned is we need to do a better job of educating people. So our FEMA representative in Catholic Charities California, one of the lessons we learned, we have to train. We have to train our providers better. And through this, we have to train local government better to understand what our limitations are as case managers. So we've been to places where they said, oh great, you're gonna go talk to all of our homeless. You know, we're not subcontractors with counties. We have a specific role. And I can say, like in the areas of Pajaro and Planada, where the state awarded an additional $20 million, 10 for public assistance and 10 for individual assistance. What a difference that made, having an extra $10 million to distribute. Just amazing. I wish they could do it throughout the state and throughout the country, actually. But it's through this DCM process that we triage. We can only help a limited number of folks with the monies that we have. As you can imagine, everybody who's been through some of this has experienced some level of trauma. So part of your long-term recovery group, part of your VOAD, hopefully you have a mental health partner that we can figure out how we can help people who are having emotional difficulties through this time. And you know, one of the things that we found, as for the January and March events, when people start saying rain, it triggers. A lot of our people have PTSD. There's another one, post-traumatic stress syndrome.
Disorder.
Thank you. Thank you. Put in an extra buck for that. But you can imagine how traumatic these events are. We have to deal with the whole person, right? We heard some beautiful music. We heard things to calm our souls. We have to be able to provide that same kind of services to our survivors. Children, they see this. You're going to see a lot of behavioral issues. They can't necessarily express through words, but it's through behavior, right? So we'll see a lot of acting out. We'll see a lot of sleepless nights. We'll see changes in routines. So again, our disaster case managers, although they're not licensed clinicians, certainly are paraprofessionals in social work. So if it's beyond their scope of ability, they will certainly refer that out to licensed providers. But they are certainly an ear for survivors to hear what's going on with their lives. And one of the processes that we have is we have a matrix system. So we take a lot of things and we add it up because we want to help those who are most needy. So we do have a process to vet, to make sure that they were actually involved at that event, but what the needs are. So when we look at a long-term recovery group of VOAD and we present cases to your group to ask for support, we vetted them. You can be rest assured that who you are getting is the people that we have ranked as the most needy. So a case will be presented to you with a lot of detailed information, damages, and what they're asking for. So whether it's materials, whether it is finances, whatever the case may be, it will be presented to this group, and you as a body will decide whether or not you're going to grant the unmet needs or not. So it's really a partnership with our case management system and with you all. And you know, we found that programs that have an existing long-term recovery group or VOAD, much more successful. You see a lot more people being discharged because they reached their success than those counties that do not have that option. I mean, it's just night and day. What else can I say about all this process? That's it. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you. So this FEMA added dollar FIDO list depends on what county you're in. We've seen them as low as 1,500. And Valerie, I think you're at 8,000 in San Diego County. 8,900 plus people signed up for FEMA services. That doesn't include all the people who say, I don't want to deal with Catholic Charities, although it's not a Catholic Charities thing. We are just the management agency, or I don't want to work with government. We have places in rural areas that they live in rural areas because they don't want to deal with local governments. So one of the things that we do is we geomap. Wherever we find someone who has been affected, who has signed up for FEMA, we will go to the neighbors and say, do you need help? So we're reaching far more than the 8,900 plus people that have been involved. And Kevin, can you keep me honest? I haven't been keeping track of my time, so when I get close to... You got it. Thank you. Thank you. Keep going. Keep it going.
Yeah, $3 in the pot that we have not got.
Okay, I'm at $21 now.
You're welcome, Zach. You're welcome, Zach. Okay, 2 minutes. Thank you very much. So, you know, in closing, I just want to say that not only do they vet survivors, but we vet vendors. You would be amazing how many construction firms ask for things that they can't deliver, right? So legally in California, we can get 10% or $1,000 to start a project. Some of these, I'll call them shady contractors, are asking for 50% or more up front, and then you never see them again. So again, we have a cost construction analyst as part of our case management team, and what they do is they kind of educate our folks. We have resource coordinators who look for various resources. We even have an access and functional needs specialist for community, for when we see, because on that FEMA FIDO list, they have a whole section of folks who have those functional needs. They describe what they are, so we can look for those resources at the same time. It's very inclusive. I have 1 minute, so you know what? I'm gonna leave with this. I just appreciate the fact that you're all at the table today, because we really need to know what our roles are. If you have any questions about case management, we have 4 tables that have content experts. Please bend their ear and ask them what they're doing, because they're doing some amazing work out there. Thank you very much, everybody. Oh, just one thing in closing. I want to just talk about the timeline for the individual assistance. So this award is good for 24 months. When we can show need, we can extend it for another 12 months for a total of 36 months. Recovery takes years and years and years. There's still people in paradise still trying to recover. So the long-term recovery group, VOADs, you need to be there 5, 10, you need to be there long after disaster case management program is done. So just want to leave you with that. Thank you very much, everybody.
Yes, we're up to $22 and counting. Where is this money going? There's a piggy bank here. I assume we're doing it. All right. So, and to not to be funny about the piggy bank, but to piggyback off what James said, just to set expectations to get your community recovered might take 10, 15, 20 years. I know San Diego, we're still sitting on somebody's funds from an unmet needs table from 2003 because she's handling her recovery. We have dollars earmarked for something and we're waiting for her to need that last little bit of money. It's 21 years later and she is not home, but she's so close. So speaking of that, of giving hope and what James was saying about just pulling it all together, we're going to talk about spiritual and emotional care. With us today is Kendrick Neal. He's the director of California Southern Baptist Disaster Relief. And I will put you up here. I know Kendrick wearing another hat, not to be funny, we all have hats. He did our training. Remember I said we had the video for the muckouts in English and Spanish. So Kendrick was our person who trained everybody who was volunteering in San Diego and also did our recording.
Good afternoon. Like many of you, I'm watching the clock, so we will help this go. But we've been talking about long-term recovery and definitions and acronyms, and if that's not confusing enough, we're going to throw the word spiritual care in front of all that stuff. And everybody, when we hear spiritual care, we have 1,000 different things that we think of. So just to help us get on the same page, I just want to give you VOAD's description and VOAD's definition of spiritual care. But even though when we say spiritual, it is so complex and there's so many complexities to that, there are some common things that run through spiritual care. Things like meaning of life, things like hope and the human spirit, what happens. And so those are common themes when we talk about spiritual. And while each person's spiritual life is unique, we still have similar trends that run through our spiritual life. Sense of community, sense of personal mission, sense of well-being and joy. And so following a disaster, we can see that many of those trends are torn apart, are ripped apart, and they need to be nurtured and they need to be attended to. I just want to read a quote from a past president of the National VOAD, and he said this. He said, "A disaster affects the entire fabric of community that existed prior to the event and can cause traumatic stress among the whole community. Disaster recovery is in large part the rebuilding of community, the retying of thousands of strands of relationship in the fabric of our beings together that have been severed by the disaster." So when we talk about spiritual care, we're including anything that insists the individual, the family, or the community drawing upon their own spiritual perspectives as a source of strength, hope, and healing after the disaster. In disaster relief, long-term recovery is anything that nourishes the human spirit in coping with the crisis. That is spiritual care. That is what we are talking about when I talk about spiritual care today. Almost every national recognized faith is a part of the VOAD. And as Valerie mentioned earlier, it might not be in your VOAD. It might be in the VOAD next to you. And if you can't find it in the VOAD next to you, you can call National VOAD, and they will have a tremendous amount of resources available to you for each faith practice. So I want to make sure that that's clear, that when you look around your table, when you're at your VOAD, and if you can't find the faith practice that you need, go higher. Call the state or call national, and they will have a tremendous amount of resources for you. So I just want to cover a few things about how spiritual care ties into long-term recovery. There's a few things. Basically, I want to give you 2 ways that it ties into it, and I want to give you 2 warnings or 2 things to watch out for. The first thing is that spiritual care in long-term recovery, this is that old saying that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And so connecting with your VOAD, connecting with your spiritual care providers of your VOAD, and putting things in place for the disaster, for planning and preparedness and training and mitigation, and working through houses of worship and places of faith to be able to connect with your people, and designing plans through the house of worship. So many times we just think that the houses of worship, we think of faith practices as something that gets in the way, but really they have a very unique connection to that community. And really what happens is when you come in after the disaster, VOAD spiritual care providers, they don't come in and replace the community spiritual care providers that are already in place. They have to work alongside them. So it's good as a VOAD to make connections with those places of worship, with those houses of worship, with those faith practices in your community before the disaster happens. So that's the one thing I really want to impart on you is try to make those connections beforehand. Try to make those connections early so you can help do the planning and the preparing and the mitigation. As we've talked about so many times before, when disaster strikes, that's not the time to build relationships. That's not the time to meet people. And your houses of worship and your faith practices, they're in your communities. They're connected to your communities, and you want to build those relationships early. So that was the first thing I want to touch about. The second thing is that during the disaster, don't neglect the communication piece that your spiritual care providers have, as they are tied to parts of the community, so ingrained in those communities. Just recently, we had a fire, and people were calling me from the churches, and pastors were calling me saying, hey, what is going on with this? And they weren't getting the information through their community or through their VOAD, and houses of worship and faith practices and spiritual care providers are one of those agencies that you could use to distribute information during the disaster. So when you're connected in VOAD and you have your partners, don't neglect the ability that they have to pass information for you during and after that disaster. There's two last things. I wanted to leave you also with a warning. So the first thing I want to tell you about is do the pre-planning. Connect with your faith practices. Connect with the people who do spiritual care in your community. The second part was the communication. Don't neglect that during or after the disaster. Now, some warnings. Spiritual care providers through VOAD, they are typically not clinical therapists. And so as a VOAD, you need to be careful with that and watch with people that are providing spiritual care. What are they able to do and what can't they do? We are more like triage, and so spiritual care providers come in there and we reference people to clinical. We do long-term relationships, but we are not those clinical providers. So when you're talking with your spiritual care providers, make sure you know what that is. And then the last thing that I just want to touch about, especially in long-term recovery, is don't forget about the spiritual and emotional care of your people. So many times that is something that VOADs do, is we are so focused on the survivors that we forget about our own people. And so I just want you to make sure that that is something you plan for your VOADs, that is something you plan for your organizations, that you connect with those people. And you keep an eye on your people, and you are protecting your people. In long-term recovery for my organization, that is something that we do. Every team that goes out has a person on that team who is monitoring the spiritual and emotional well-being of each person on that team. And so that is just something I just want to make sure you're doing as leaders in your communities and of your teams. That's what.
All right, and there should be a book for everyone on the table. And just to, I'm looking at the piggy bank, which is why I keep seeing piggyback, on what Kendrick said. Think about with your VOAD, how you would operate during peacetime and then replicate some of that. So if you have a once a quarter, you're getting together and having a meeting, make it when you break bread with people. My long-term recovery group, my DCMP, and the team that's working with people day in, day out, we do a monthly meal. We have a lunch. We skipped one in September, but we're back on track. But the idea is that, we need to create a safe space for us to take care of ourselves.
Stop the video, please.
Yes, I don't even have the thing, the clicker. Stop his video, yes, please. Sorry. Yes, I can't speak to construction, thank you. Thinking about that, the disaster case management program, James has baked in trauma-informed care practices and the work that they do in the training, but also support resources for those disaster case managers so that we have those tools to take care of ourselves, because it's a long ride. I think Tonje said it's a marathon, not a sprint. And so pacing yourself is key. And it's so I've got a couple of questions that were posed by several of you when you registered online. I'm going to run through those. And then Mike, you have a mic in case we have questions. So I'm going to hit with 3, and then if we have time, if Mike says we have time, we'll take more. So for each of our presenters, if you can share 2 things with the group, who are the typical partners in your specific work? And what would be either a pitfall that you would recommend to the group to avoid, or a lesson you learned that you want to share? And Kevin, you've got the mic. If you'll just, we'll start with Tonje. No pressure, Tonje.
Is it on? Yes. So two partners are county government. We would not be able to do it without them, especially now that we're doing, throughout the cycle, but we're doing voluntary rebuild work right now. And so we are constantly communicating with the planning department and OR3 about the work that we do. Yes, so that's one. And the other one is the disaster case management organizations. We could not do the work that we do if it wasn't for their work, vetting and supporting the clients that we work for. Pitfalls in my work, long-term recovery. I think something that we could have been better at early is creating clear parameters for funding allocations for our disaster case managers. It's something that has been challenging to know exactly when to say yes and when to say no. And then what was the last one? Successes?
Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. Oh gosh, so many. I think the biggest lesson is to keep a structure in place for future disasters, to not let this go away, what we have learned, because we saw that during the atmospheric rivers, that having a long-term recovery group structure in place helped us sort of kick into gear really quickly and do what needed to be done.
I would say government as well. The permitting process for each county is different, as Kevin had pointed out, and you can move mountains in a short period of time if you have the cooperation and the same vision. And then long-term recovery groups, VOADs, you guys are key in making sure that they get the resources that they need. Pitfalls, and I think Renee Jackson kind of alluded to this. I wish we had providers in each county starting day one. That would begin the entire process a whole lot earlier. And unfortunately, we just can't find everybody just yet. And I'm sorry, the last one was?
Lesson learned.
My gosh, that we're not stagnant. We're learning every day. We're implementing everything that we've learned and putting into a curriculum into practice for best practices. So with each new disaster, we're able to share that with our new providers and existing providers. So thank all of you for that.
So when we talk about partners, and there's just so many names. So I would just say national faith practices and organizations across the nation. There's so many. But then the other one is local faith churches and houses of worship. Just such a unique relationship with the community. And we often forget that. And so those would be the two partners, national faith organizations and local churches. As far as things
pitfalls.
Pitfalls. I actually got to share those with you. Right? And those were some of the things I talked about, is just neglecting the communication aspect that our houses of worship have in those communities and those relationships, and sidelining those because we're looking at a checklist and we're not using those community relationships that we have within our own VOAD. We're not fully using those. And so that's a pitfall. A lesson learned is taking care of our people. We see it all the time, and I can tell you there's been times when I've sent teams out and I didn't have a chaplain or I didn't have a spiritual care provider, but I just wanted to do something so quick, and most of the time I paid for that. And not having somebody intentionally taking care of our teams that are in those disaster relief scenarios.
I think for the building, your two major partners that you look at is, one, the long-term recovery group, and that includes your liaisons to Cal OES and to FEMA, and having all of those pieces that come together that help further the build. The other component is the local building department. Local building departments, as I mentioned to you earlier, is that no two counties do it the same way. So you want to make sure that you're building to their codes. Even though we have blueprints and they come across the way to the county, the challenge you have is there's no two inspectors that are the same. So one inspector might come in and say that, oh, you did this wrong and you got to redo it. So you got to have that good relationship with the building department. And then my pitfall, I would have to say, is get everything in writing. When you're working with your local building departments, we've had times where they'll say, oh, just go ahead and do it that way and you're good. And then you'll say, can I have that in writing? Because, the next inspector's going to tell me to redo it because I do that. And so you'll find that many of them won't put anything in writing to you, and you end up having to be at the mercy of the different building inspectors that come in. So those are my successes and my pitfalls.
All right, thank you for that. Piggybacking off of Kendrick's, the pitfall about communication. So I'm old. My fire was 2007, and I did what he said. I actually went to all my faith partners and all my impacted zip codes, and I gave them my communications for survivors and for partner agencies so they could put it in their bulletin. So whatever day they met, that got out to people. That was just part of what we did because we needed to cast a wide net and catch people wherever they were. Mike, we've got less than 5 minutes. If you have a question for the group, if you'll raise your hand, Mike or I will bring a microphone to you. You just have to call out who your question is for. Oh no, not Dave, for you.
I know the answer to this, but I wanted to share. What is the best and how often should we communicate the journey of recovery to our victims or our survivors? And how long should we repeat that story of how to recover?
About 10 more times than when you thought you were done, right? And that's just something that you can never do enough of. And so oftentimes I hear, oh, we put that out last week. Well, half people didn't get it. So I would say, when you think you're done, do it 10 more times.
And that goes to that no wrong door approach, right? You want everybody communicating. Time.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, also create multiple ways of communicating with people. So some people are going to read a text message, some people are going to read the postcard that arrives in their mail, but a lot of people aren't. And so you need to also create community forums and gathering spaces where people will come out to get other vital information for their recovery and then be there and share the information that you think that they need.
In terms of case management, we have a tier system, so we may schedule meetings once a week or more often depending on the need. So we have 1, 2, 3, and 4 being the weekly and then bi-weekly. In terms of one of the unique things that happened in Fresno, they didn't call it a trauma group meeting, they called it coffee and cookies. So everybody felt more comfortable attending that little group, and they invariably shared their shared experience, which was invaluable. So I would say do that at least every other week if you could, or every month.
Next question.
Hi, it's actually a follow-up. My name is Andrea Estrada, and I was hired in February for the Pajaro Recovery Projects. I'm all Pajaro, and I wanted to follow up with your question. Last week, I went to the Pajaro Food Center, and I saw a little girl wearing a pet backpack, meaning like it's clear and you can see like a cat or whatever pet you want. And I asked this little girl, why do you have the 2 little birds in the backpack? And she said, last year my birds drowned at the Pajaro flooding. So she said, I'm scared that's gonna happen again. So it still continues. And since I have everybody's attention, I want to thank Aretha from Catholic Charities, Premier Bridges, Patricia, and Anna. We've been working with these residents for months, and so it's hard. It's still very hard. People are still scared and angry and frustrated, and we just do our best. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great comment, guys. I had the pleasure of spending 9 months in Pajaro and coordinating a lot of the cleanup effort. And one of the things that working in a migrant community, we found a lot of challenges. But what a resilient community, the love and respect that they show to one another, their homes, their families. And we have to remember, and this is more in the response than it is in the rebuild, is that I noticed that families would come up, and every day the same family would come and ask for a bottle of bleach. And you thought to yourself, well, should I give it to them? What are they doing with all this bleach? And then I realized something is that a lot of these families don't know where that next resource is coming from. So they gather, they kind of nest, and they have these things because they don't know what tomorrow holds, and they don't know where that's going to come from. And so I want to remind you all, when you're in the response phase or you're moving through the recovery, be generous to those families because they really do need that assistance.
And pay attention to cultural competency, knowing the communities you're serving, and because there are things you might not have in mind.
Hi, I'm Cole Cameron, a senior cert instructor, which is Community Emergency Response Team on FEMA program of Neighbors Helping Neighbors. Been really happy to take off from Marsh's $20 list and the 20 languages. We're serving the community with cert in Spanish, Vietnamese, and Chinese Mandarin. So that's just a resource for everyone in the preparation phase. One of my questions as an old systems guy is, I know about VisionLink being around Marcia and our cadre team, and I know there's other systems in Red Cross, Catholic Charities, maybe the Small Business Administration, the State Operations Center, or perhaps even FEMA. Is there any collaboration sitting down with those so we have one system with everything in it?
Well, that's why we created the Vision Link, and the folks in Colorado did a really good job recognizing that. As I mentioned to you earlier, how many times do we wish that we had a system that allowed us to work together, collaborate, and to be able to share that information? All these organizations we work really well together in the response phase, but when you come to databases, you've got the ETO, which is owned by Catholic Charities, and they can't share their information. That's really, thank you very much.
Efforts to outcomes.
Yeah, you're going to shoot me in just another minute. Then we've got the Red Cross that has their own database, and they can't share their information. But what we did with VisionLink, so you know, is that with VisionLink, not only do our partners all use it in the local assistance centers and then what we call the Hope City Disaster Resource Village, we all gather that information and they get all their data back. So we have a system that we're using in the response phase, but as we move, the challenge that you have is you got FEMA that has their privacy, and they won't share information with us unless they have a contract with our friends at Catholic Charities or whoever gets the contract. And then you've got, Red Cross has their privacy scenarios that they go through, and we have to respect those. And we do. I'm with you 100%. I wish there was a way that we could collaboratively have something at the end of the day that encompasses everything, but we're getting there, baby steps. We, at least in the response phase, we now have that that's in place. And I know it's not the answer you're looking for, but unfortunately that is the case, and we'll continue to work together collaboratively to find ways to make it work.
Yeah, and thank you all for your time. We appreciate you joining us today. Adriana, we've got those break. Mike's got questions. Here we go. I'll talk to you later about how to flip the paradigm for data. Sorry, Kevin.
Thank you. Yeah, appreciate that. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. Thank the panel. They did such a wonderful job.